Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 303, Ringing the Bell to Go Public. At 11:55 noon, the sun slowly rose to its highest point, and sunlight shone through the gaps in the tall buildings. Daniel Harvey walked out of the bank's high door in disheveled clothes. His eyes did not gleam with determination and expectation like those of other entrepreneurs who had received investment and were preparing to go public. He was holding the heavy investment agreement tightly in his hand, with a hint of drunkenness on his face, and his custom-made suit was stretched out by his swollen belly. The unbuttoned buttons and flushed cheeks all showed his recent indulgence. The vehicle was waiting outside the door. Still the green 1960 took a dilaxidandivile. He leaned against the car door and closed his eyes in deep thought, reviewing his experiences from the time he stepped into Wall Street to now, which was only half an hour ago. Carefully prepared vehicles, high-level positions that have been prepared long ago, and drinking beer with top bigwigs in that short moment, which seemed like a dream. He began to understand why his wife liked to watch those boring soap operas. I fantasize that one day my life will suddenly undergo a major change, because it really feels great. Please take some vitamin B and drink some water. This will be of great help to your condition. If there are no problems, please get in the car and we will go to the trading hall. The young driver appeared behind him again, holding a small can of chewable vitamins and a bottle of mineral water. Thank you. Daniel Harvey did not refuse the other party's kindness. After taking the vitamins, he got into the car directly. As soon as he got in the car, he looked at the luxurious interior and couldn't help but ask, "What's your name?" If nothing unexpected happens, I have completed my mission and accepted Mr. Damon's good luck. I should be able to get a personal secretary of my own, young man. If you are willing, I can hire you. It's my pleasure, sir. My name is Dietrich Macduff. The driver calmly sat back in the driving seat, skillfully started the ignition and shifted gears, and the vehicle slowly drove towards the destination. The vehicle was running very smoothly, like a leaf floating on a lake. Daniel Harvey, who was sitting in the back seat, saw through the car window the reporters who had been waiting for a long time, as well as the countless fans of the company who came to support him. His feet once again stepped on the line of Wall Street, feeling that every building around him exuded the breath of power and wealth. Dazzling flashes of light kept flashing, and countless reporters swarmed around him. This driver named Dietrich was indeed not an ordinary person. He opened his arms to block all the reporters, then he followed Daniel Harvey's pace. At the same time, he could also answer questions from reporters from time to time. "We have no comment on when the new products will be released. Please pay attention to the next press conference for details. The stock financing distribution has been completed, and the 6 major investment banks have given their evaluations. Mr. Harvey just came here from Morgan Chase Bank. His appearance has already made it clear that the market is absolutely optimistic about the company's overall direction and the remaining 3,000 million shares. After the official launch, it will be directly placed in all free markets and investors around the world can invest freely. As for the review of the company's listing qualifications, I think you might get a good answer if you ask the White House." Hearing the appropriate answer behind him, Daniel Harvey smiled with satisfaction, even a little pride. Entering the center of the trading hall, I was surrounded by traders wearing uniform white shirts and flashing electronic screens. The usual hustle and bustle disappeared without a trace, replaced by uniform and warm applause. "You are most welcome, Mr. Harvey. It is indeed a great pity that Mr. Hohenzollern cannot come here in person. But a good story must be full of legacy to be remembered forever, and the beginning of a good company does not necessarily need to be perfect. Please come with me." The chairman of the stock exchange, Richard Yell, an ordinary-looking middle-aged man, just saw the 2 men enter the trading hall. Amid the applause all around him, he shook hands cordially with Daniel Harvey and exchanged a few pleasantries. While expressing his congratulations, he then led the other party to the center of the exchange, where a huge stage was temporarily built. Several specially customized huge screens stand on both sides, and a large bronze clock is placed in the center of the stage point compared with this big bell. The bells that companies ring when they go public are just toy bells. Do you need to do a final check? When he stepped onto the stage, Daniel Harvey no longer felt the nervousness he had when he first arrived on Wall Street. I made a joke to the chairman. The other party also responded with a smile. You are so humorous. All the financial reports and legal documents of your company's listing have been coordinated by the legal team specially assigned by the White House. It has been fully reviewed and all the legal documents are impeccable. It can be used as a textbook in law school. There were financial issues, but I think they were perfectly resolved today, especially after you've done it once. Wall Street will once again witness the rise of a great multinational company, and together we will witness the realization of another American dream. Richard Yell answered that it was official enough. His task now was to keep smiling and stand next to the man next to him. To ensure that the reporters in the audience can take the most perfect photos and at the same time hope to achieve the greatest success in his career. Clang, clang, the sound of church bells came slowly from afar. The time came to 12 noon. When the moment of ringing the bell came, Daniel Harvey took a deep breath, swung the gavel, and the clear sound of the bell resounded throughout the trading hall. The applause and cheers did not appear as expected, and the trading hall, which was extremely quiet just now, instantly turned into a fierce battlefield. The stock code of Mad Magic Technology Company began to flash. As the numbers jumped, countless traders stared at the display screen and their fingers moved rapidly on the keyboard. Trying to seize every possible buying and selling opportunity. The air is filled with the smell of coffee and sweat, a breath of pressure and expectation. It's so embarrassing. Looking at the scene in the audience, Daniel Harvey shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, I thought they would at least give me a cheer. They express their ideas with numbers and actions, said Richard Yale with a smile. At the same time, he pointed his fingers at several huge screens next to the stage. The wildly rising curves showed the attitudes of everyone present. The numbers keep jumping and refreshing, like an upward function. Looking at the curve that keeps climbing. Daniel Harvey nodded with satisfaction, put his hand into his pocket, and fumbled with the buttons of the mobile phone in his pocket. After finding the dial button and pressing it lightly, a text message flew across thousands of mountains and rivers to a cabin somewhere in the Rocky Mountains through invisible electronic signals. Ding. Dong. When the crisp sound of text message alert came, Kevin Lestrange, who looked haggard, just glanced at it silently. JP Morgan Chase, $50 billion to get it done. Ha ha ha. Then he focused his eyes on the large computer screen in front of him and worked frantically on the keyboard with his hands. Come on. The 500 billion goal starts now. Chapter 304, Kilo Blue Flame. On December 12th, deep in the Rocky Mountains, half a month had passed since Mad Magic Technology Company went public on Wall Street. Time flies, and winter comes quietly. Several heavy snowfalls make the entire mountain range even quieter. Thousands of kilometers away from New York. The race against time and exciting financial wars in the trading halls of Wall Street seem to have nothing to do with here. Deep in the mountains, two young men walked with light steps through the snow-covered forest. Their eyes were firm and focused, their hands tightly grasped bows and arrows. And they had only one target in mind, the fat white-tailed deer. Point me, Cedric took out his wand, tapped it lightly on the white snow, and as he chanted a spell, a thin red thread appeared on the snow. Looking at the direction indicated by the red line, Karl behind him said helplessly, if you weren't so soft-hearted, there would be no need for us to stay outside for another hour in such cold weather. Remember who you are now. You are a hunter. If you can't do it, go back and chop your wood. I understand. Cedric lowered his head in shame. Today he specifically begged Karl to take him out hunting. The reason is simple. Ever since the company went public, Kevin Lestrange has been alone, locking himself in that little house. I spend the whole day typing away on my computer keyboard, and from time to time I dial a number on my satellite phone. Sometimes they talked in a friendly and amiable manner, sometimes they cursed hysterically, and more often they were like Professor Snape, inexplicably sarcastic. He once thought that the other party was going crazy. After all, no normal person would skip dinner for work. What's even more terrifying is that due to the other party's abnormal mental state, coupled with Karl's partiality and tolerance towards him. In that cabin, my status had fallen to a terrible level. Except for cleaning and shopping. There was almost no work for me to do, and Karl didn't want to talk to me. As for that guy. Thinking of this, Cedric couldn't help but shudder. It would be better for him not to get into trouble with that guy. Let's go. Mr. Lestrange's lunchtime is less than half an hour away. If we can't finish the hunting work, we will be in trouble. You will take his lunch in today, Karl, urged the dazed Cedric, and walked out first. Walking in the deep snow was a slow and painful thing. It is also easy for people to fall into memories. He really can't understand the guy behind him. What on earth are you thinking about with that big head? It's obvious that you know nothing about the financial industry and you don't know how to handle relationships with strangers, but he insisted on joining in the fun and suffered a loss of nearly $2 million in 1 week, which directly caused Kevin Lestrange, who had been working intensively for a week, to suffer. He cursed at him and was so angry that he didn't even eat dinner that night. He also hung a sign on the door of his office: Cedric, the fool is off limits. After seeing those words, this guy came to me and cried to me before going to bed at night. He said that he and the other party were in partnership and that he was completely biased and unfair and denied his work ability and bullied him in the workplace. The only work assigned to him was unskilled work like chopping wood, and they didn't want him to get involved in any other matters. When he thought of this, Karl couldn't help but hold his forehead and shake his head. At the same time, his mind began to recall the disaster-stricken cabin that had happened to him over the past month. There is no need to say much about what happened when the fire happened while cooking. What's even more infuriating is that this guy actually forgot to turn off the gas stove after cooking. If I hadn't come back early from hunting that night, this guy might have died in the room from gas poisoning. And at the moment, when I used the magic potion to bring this guy back to life, his first reaction was to light a lamp, because it was dark. The entire cabin almost turned into a rocket and flew into the sky. Thinking of these bad things, Karl couldn't help but have a headache and began to regret whether it was a wrong decision to open the door of the train compartment and let this guy in. Carol, come over here and take a look. Just as Carol was reminiscing, Cedric's excited voice suddenly came from behind him, and he quickly turned around and ran over. Did you find that white-tailed deer? No, look. Cedric's face was full of excitement. In front of him was the snow that he had dug up with his hands. On the open space, there was an extremely gorgeous blue flower, swaying in the cold wind. The flower was very strange. Its petals were a deep blue, like the brightest stars in the night sky. The petals are covered with delicate silver patterns, which shimmer softly in the moonlight, like stars dancing in the dark. The center of the flower emits a faint blue light, like a solidified flame, mysterious and charming. What is this? Karl looked at the flower in surprise, his face full of confusion. This is called Kilo Blue Flame, Cedric said proudly. It grows on the top of a distant snow-covered mountain. It is a very strange magical plant. According to ancient legends, anyone who picks it will have the opportunity to make a wish. What? Karl looked at Cedric in disbelief, his body trembling slightly. What you said is true. That's how it was recorded, but it's a pity it's false. Cedric nodded slightly at first, then kept shaking his head. That's just a beautiful legend. This is a very strange magical plant. If it is made into a potion, it can only make people slightly more energetic. It has a similar effect to that bitter black decoction you gave me before, but it's really beautiful, isn't it? What's the use of that? It looks good but is useless. Cole was suddenly a little angry and wanted to pull Cedric up from the snow. But the other party waved him away, and the guy carefully covered the snow again until the surroundings were restored to their original state. Then he slowly stood up and looked at Carol with a silly smile on his face. What are you laughing at? If it is true as you said, even if this flower does not have such magical effects, it is still a very precious magical plant. Why don't you take it off? It's a small fortune, Karl asked doubtfully, but Cedric answered with a silly smile on his face. It belongs here, doesn't it? Although the killer blue flame doesn't have the magical power as the legend says, it has another name called the flower of luck, because it will only grow in places where there are large numbers of magical animals, because only these magical animals gather there. There is sufficient magic power around, which shows that this mountain has indeed become a paradise for magical animals as you said. It was opened because of your success. You didn't deceive Hagrid. You fulfilled your promise, Karl. You are a good person with a kind heart. Chapter 305 Life and Apology. What nonsense are you talking about? Even though he was wearing a thick scarf, Karl's 2 ears, the only parts exposed, turned red in an instant. Stop saying those inexplicable things. Karl stretched out his hands and tightly grasped Cedric's face, twisting and pulling it to both sides. It hurts. It hurts. Stop it. I'm praising you. Cedric, whose face was pinched, kept slapping Karl's wrist with both hands, while trying desperately to explain. What I said is all knowledge from books, and it's not a bad thing to say that you are kind. Why are you like this? Shut up. Shut up. Karl's ears were already extremely red, and his hands were pulling hard with all his might. The intense pain made Cedric's little feet jump around so much that he was almost shaking. A full minute later, Cedric squatted on the ground with a wronged look on his face, cupping his hands with snow to apply to his swollen face. His eyes were full of grievance, and he squatted on the ground like a forgotten mushroom. Okay. Stop being so mad, and get up quickly. If we don't find that white-tailed deer, we won't have dinner tonight. Behind Cedric, Karl folded his arms and stared at the other person, urging him constantly point. But Cedric still squatted on the ground stubbornly, as if he didn't hear what Carol said. What a troublesome guy. Karl shook his head helplessly and walked slowly towards the direction of the white-tailed deer traces alone. It's hard to be confident when praise for others is met with malicious intent. There has never been such an unreasonable and selfish person, who is arbitrary, tyrannical, unreasonable, and fond of using violence. What a disgusting fellow. Faint mumblings continued to sound behind him. Karl, who had entered the hunting state, listened to the sound coming from behind him. And when you look back, you can see the silent mushroom squatting on the ground with its back to you. It really gives me a headache. But when I think about it carefully, it seems that it is really my fault, but it is impossible to get him to apologize. So the 2 boys slowly moved towards their goal in this strange way. The sun gradually rose to its highest point, leaving a series of footprints of varying depths on the snow. Every step seemed so cautious, expectant, and a little weird. The snow on the branches occasionally falls gently due to the breeze, adding a bit of vitality to the quiet forest. Suddenly, a white-tailed deer appeared in their sight, foraging gracefully on the snow. Seemingly unaware of the approaching danger, Karl hid his body behind a pine tree and tried to reduce his breathing rate as much as possible to avoid being discovered by his prey. He took out a bow and arrow from behind him and was about to draw the bow and put the arrow on it, but then he seemed to think of something. He turned around and looked at the silent mushroom behind him, kicked the other's bud with his toes, and squatted down and whispered in the other's ear, "This prey is yours. Whoever does the job should complete it. This is our principle. Complete your job and we can discuss the issue of apology." "Well, Mr. Diggory." The silent mushrooms seemed to be awakened by the rain. They shook their bodies a few times and slowly stood up from the snow. With her red cheeks swollen from being pinched and a look of aggrieved eyes, she stared at Carol in front of her. "Don't lie to me, Mr. Hohenzollern." "Of course." Karl smiled and offered the bow and arrow in his hands. With both hands Cedric took the bow and arrows, went to the hunting site, and looked at the beautiful creature in the open space. Hold your breath slowly. Slowly pull the bowstring, and aim at the beating life. The arrow flew out of the string, cut through the air, and headed straight for the target. However, fate seemed to play a joke on him, and the arrow just grazed the deer's body, only stirring up a snowflake. "Carol, you," Cedric exclaimed. He didn't expect that Karl behind him would deliberately miss the target. The white-tailed deer in the open space raised its head alertly and began to run flexibly. He was about to run into the dense forest. At this critical moment point the arrow in Cedric's hand was instantly released, and another arrow cut through the air and flew straight towards the moving target point. The arrow hit its target accurately, and the white-tailed deer fell to the snow, with steaming blood flowing from the wound point. The pure white chicken blood was dyed into a glaring blood red, and the painful cries of the deer echoed throughout the valley. "Why are you doing this?" Cedric turned his head angrily and looked at Karl behind him, questioning loudly. "Are you trying to cheat?" "Am I trying to cheat, Mr. Diggory?" Karl had his signature smirk on his face, and he put the bow and arrow back into his ring point. She slowly walked to Cedric's side, put her hand on his shoulder and patted him gently. "You are playing tricks on me, Mr. Diggory. From the moment we saw this prey, your first arrow should have hit the opponent's heart. You don't know how to shoot an arrow at all. How can you be a sports idiot when you are the Quidditch captain of the Hufflepuff house at Hogwarts? On the contrary, you are very talented. Your talent in mathematics and science and engineering has made you good at this kind of sport that requires concentration. You just can't bear it." Cedric was silent, his head lowered, his knuckles turning white as he held the long bow in his hands. Carol stretched out a hand, let the other's big head lean on his shoulder, sighed helplessly and said softly, "Anne, you didn't do that for any bullshit cold violence. You just saw it on the TV news. Those ordinary muggles who bought the stocks lost everything. Their families were ruined, and that's why you look at Kevin Lestrange's rising revenue figures. You start to feel guilty and even scared." Cedric tried to explain, but was grabbed by Karl, who pointed at the white-tailed deer that was still screaming in pain in the valley below. "Don't explain, and don't even think about changing anything. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not that you didn't shoot the arrow yourself. You will not be responsible for this life. Everything you are enjoying now, and everything that humans are enjoying, in the final analysis, it is based on the law of the jungle where the strong prey on the weak. The only thing you can do is to be kind and let the prey have a better time." As he spoke, Karl handed a knife to Cedric and patted him on the back point with a burst of air. Cedric was instantly teleported to the side of the injured white-tailed deer, looking at the white-tailed deer lying on the ground with its lung pierced by an arrow and the desire for life in its pupils. Cedric didn't hesitate for a moment. He raised the knife in his hand high, aimed at the artery in the opponent's neck, and stabbed it hard. The hot blood sprayed all over his face, and on the edge of the cliff in the open space, Karl stood there silently looking at Cedric with blood on his face. He lowered his eyes and spoke softly. "I'm sorry, I'm not a kind person, and I can't be a kind person. What we are about to do is something downright bad. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 306 Kilo Blue Flame and Blue Tulip. MAD Technology has achieved a month of high growth, with a 35% surge on the first day of trading. It is the fastest growing science and technology company in the world since the 20th century, or it should be the representative of all types of companies. Experts predict that the company's stock will continue to rise after the first generation of official products is released, but some experts still insist that the technology and products demonstrated by this company are completely unrealizable with existing technology. Just like the name of their company, it seems to be a combination of science and magic. At the same time, Wall Street exchanges have also issued warnings to investors, believing that the current share prices of MAD technology companies are greatly overvalued. A trading frenzy on this scale will trigger an unimaginable bubble and financial crisis. The sound of the TV in the living room came into the bedroom through the door, and Cedric, who was sleeping soundly, slowly woke up. He sat on the bed and hugged himself. The deep dark circles under his eyes showed that he did not sleep very well last night. In fact, he was completely sleepless the whole night yesterday. He felt that, as soon as he closed his eyes, he could smell the smell of blood. The blood that had just spurted out of the artery, with the residual heat of body temperature, splashed directly onto his face. No matter how many times I washed my face, the smell of blood could not be wiped away. He looked out the window and saw snow-capped mountains under a clear sky. The sun shone on the snow-capped peaks, shining brightly. Like an exquisite painting. It is so beautiful that it makes your heart beat faster. Cedric gave a knowing smile, not because of the beautiful view outside the window. In fact, what attracted his attention was the pot of bright blue tulips on the windowsill. He jumped out of bed and walked to the windowsill. He picked up a metal kettle that seemed to have been prepared by someone nearby, hummed a little tune, and began to water the flowers. Just as he took the kettle away from the windowsill, he suddenly found a note under the kettle. There's a plant next to it that needs your care. Don't ask me why I brought it here. This is the land I bought. Everything here belongs to me personally. Please don't let me feed you to death. Looking at the childish words and the expression at the end, Cedric could only smile helplessly. I pulled open a curtain and saw the white sunlight shining through. In a small flower pot, there lies a kilo blue flame quietly. It's so beautiful. Cedric couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the flower in front of him. Under the morning sunlight, the petals of kilo blue flame appear a deep blue, like the brightest stars in the night sky. The petals are covered with delicate golden patterns that sparkle brightly in the sunlight, like the sun dancing in the darkness of the universe. Looking at the flower in front of him, and then at the blue tulip next to it, Cedric suddenly felt that these two flowers seemed to correspond to his life. The golden flowers that show off their beauty irresistibly, and the blue tulips that still appear soft, graceful, and even a little dull under the sun. Why do I look like that annoying guy in myself? Even if you grow a flower, you have to show off your uniqueness. What a bore. Cedric pouted, holding a metal watering can in his hand, pointed it at the kilo blue flame, and kept watering it. It was like trying to drown someone with water, but unfortunately the metal watering can in hand had limited capacity. It failed to drown the annoying guy, but instead made the beautiful blue flame become more upright. The unfolded petals under the sunlight looked like 6 balls of golden flames. From a distance, it looked like a small sun had fallen on the windowsill. You said I eat too much, but you are the same. You are a rude and unreasonable guy who always makes decisions for others. You speak arrogantly and eccentrically. If you weren't good looking, no one would want to get close to you. Cedric stretched out his finger and kept poking the flower in front of him, muttering to himself, cough, cough. It was not until several loud coughs were heard from the living room that Cedric suddenly realized that the bedroom door connecting to the living room did not seem to be closed. He quickly put away the 3 quilts and all the debris in the room and pretended that he had just finished cleaning. He changed into a new set of clothes and walked into the living room with a serious face. At this moment, in the living room, Karl was sitting in the middle of the sofa, with his legs crossed, and the remote control in his hand, his fingers pressing frantically to change channels. As soon as he heard Cedric's footsteps, he turned his head slightly, and gave him a meaningful look. Then he immediately retracted his gaze, stared at the TV, and said with a relaxed look, "Did you have a nightmare last night? You tossed and turned the whole night, and didn't sleep well. Hunting a white-tailed deer seems to have put a lot of psychological pressure on you. As your leader, it was indeed my fault for not considering the psychological endurance of my employees. I will compensate you with a year-end bonus, and there's no need to chop wood today. Today is the final battle of the first stage. We'll take a day off, go to the kitchen, and have some breakfast first. We'll celebrate together after Mr. Lestrange is done." "Oh," Cedric responded coldly, then walked quickly into the kitchen with a step that showed he didn't care about anyone. As soon as he entered the kitchen, he immediately locked the kitchen door and made a victory gesture with his fist. A smile of success appeared on his face. He opened the food cover of the hard drive and looked at the passion fruit pudding that was specially prepared inside. And strawberry jam pie. Leaning deliberately against a kitchen chair, he also crossed his legs like Karl and spoke in a serious tone. "Given that Mr. Hohenzollern has recognized his mistakes, but is still unwilling to conduct a positive review, this Friendly court sentences Mr. Hohenzollern to a downgrade in friendship to the barely acceptable level if he continues to be so arrogant and rude in the future. Being unwilling to consider other people's feelings and thoughts deprives them of their rights as friends and sentences them to a life sentence of friendlessness. After sentencing Karl to death, Cedric laughed wildly. He did feel some fear and instinctive disgust about what happened yesterday. But in the final analysis, the reason lies with Karl and the other party's recent tough attitude and demands on him. He felt unhappy and a little uncomfortable. What was even more annoying was that the other party paid more attention to that annoying guy. He was always overly tolerant and partial to the other party, but finally today he realized his mistake and was willing to make this apology, which was not really an apology. Considering these delicious foods, I can still forgive it. But while Cedric was enjoying his meal, Kevin Lestrange was holding a MacBook Air 1000 in the living room. Just as he was about to report the situation to Carol, neither of them focused their eyes on the computer, but looked towards the kitchen. Listening to the strange noises coming from inside, one felt extremely embarrassed, while the other had an indescribable smile on his face. You said that his mind was stimulated, and he couldn't accept so many realistic things at once, so he needed comfort and encouragement. But now the information I got from the voice doesn't seem to be true, so I went to look for the flour overnight, getting up early in the morning to prepare delicious food again. Mr. Hohenzollern, I suddenly realize that you are as stupid as him in some aspects. I am describing a possible fact. This guy couldn't sleep last night, and it might not be because of a nightmare at all. It's just because his 36.8C pillow disappeared last night. Chapter 307 Professional Report and Calming Kitten. Karl looked at the sarcastic Kevin Lestrange in front of him, and apart from feeling a little embarrassed, he didn't have any good words to explain. He was even a little angry. Cedric was such a fool. Didn't he consider that this was just a self-built cabin? How can there be such good sound insulation between rooms? Can't you laugh a little quieter? Okay, Mr. Hohenzollern. As an employee, I can't comment too much on matters of friendship. I think you should be free now to discuss business matters. I have already given you 5% of the shares 5 minutes ago, cash out at the highest point. Here is the frequency of the rise I calculated, along with a simple numerical specification. Please take a look at it. Kevin Lestrange looked at Karl, who was standing there awkwardly, with a sneer on his face, and handed him a piece of A4 paper. Based on the stock price of $20 per share on the day of listing, the average daily increase over the past month has been about 18.5%. There were several fluctuations in the middle, which just offset the redundancy of a few days. According to a simple formula calculation, the current price per share is about $3,255.221. Your 5% of the stock is exactly 500 million shares. If you sell all of them, you can get about US dollars, combined with the approximately 200 billion US dollars from the last round of financing. You now have a total of approximately 367 billion US dollars in your account, and all of it has been received. The remaining 143 billion US dollars is waiting for your order to proceed. Kevin Lestrange was operating on his MacBook Air 1000, displaying the changes in the stock market over the past month. Sometimes I have to admire that a stupid mouse who is stealing cakes in the kitchen does have extraordinary talents in some aspects. The arcane intellect, he wrote. The AI big model system really reduced a lot of my workload, but if he hadn't messed up that time, the 2 million yuan would have become about 20 billion yuan now. I think you will help him bear this expensive expense. Well, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's see how the market reacts. Kevin Lestrange pointed at the complicated candlestick chart on the computer screen, and while explaining it, he did not forget to tease Cedric. But Karl had to admit that the sulking guy in front of him was indeed very capable, and his analysis was very professional. He elaborated in detail on why he had just cashed out from various angles, including market confidence, international reaction, and industrial chain supply. In general, the stock price in the short term is still because of your and that person's outstanding performance. I really admire your vision of people. The airport's duty manager was a natural performer. telling those vulgar and lowbrow jokes, but it just happens that it always attracts the attention of the media and public opinion, and he spreads it on the internet and major TV stations. It has raised the company's popularity to an unimaginable height, and has also driven up the stock price in a short period of time. As he spoke, Kevin Lestrange buttoned up the last button on his shirt, trying to appear as serious and professional as possible. He analyzed seriously in his cute voice that sounded a little childish due to the magic transformation, but we have to admit that our goal is to maximize investment returns while controlling risks. As he said this, he switched to another form. Here we can see that, although the overall market sentiment remains optimistic, some indicators have begun to show signs of reversal. For example, price-to-earnings ratios are at all-time highs, and inflows have declined recently, even with the investment of the largest commercial banks as ballast. But based on these data, I suggest we gradually reduce our holdings of this stock now to lock in profits and avoid the risk of a possible pullback. Excellent report. Karl clapped his hands softly, looking at the person in front of him who looked like a baby emperor penguin. The little boy, wearing a specially made small black suit and white shirt, reported to him with a serious expression. He couldn't help but feel playful again, and pretended to be a real boss. After thinking for a while, he expressed his doubts. Have you considered other factors, such as industry dynamics or macroeconomic conditions, HMPH? Kevin Lestrange snorted coldly, with an expression that showed he had expected it. Of course. As he spoke, he switched to another watch and continued with a serious expression. Here are the key indicators we monitor and factors that may affect the stock price. I believe that by cashing out in time, we can help restore sanity to the market while protecting your interests from future volatility and preparing for the next steps. Is this moral? Karl pretended to be worried. Kevin Lestrange looked disdainful, but it was obvious that he would continue to act out this scene. He continued speaking in a serious and professional manner. Morality? It's a great honor to hear this word from you. Let me put it this way, in the financial market, any ethical behavior will only lead to failure. This is the only professional ethics for any financial practitioner. We serve the clients. We are a group of hounds prowling the internet world and the stock market. Every time I bared my teeth, it was just to let the owner behind me enjoy the fattest duck. That's amazing. Karl didn't continue his performance. He stood up and snatched the laptop from the other person's hand. He turned off the phone and threw it aside, then reached out and rubbed the soft head hard. What are you doing? Kevin Lestrange first raised his head comfortably, then he instantly realized what was happening and got furious. His eyes were fixed on Karl. His face was drooping and his teeth were bared, like an angry kitten. Nothing. Shouldn't I show some kindness to my good friends? Karl smiled, hugged the other person's neck tightly with his right hand, and rubbed the other person's head with his left hand. He turned the other person's carefully combed slicked back hair into a messy mess. Faced with such torture, Kevin Lestrange was stunned for more than a minute and allowed himself to be manipulated like a doll with the batteries removed. But he quickly reacted and struggled to break free from Karl's restraints. He picked up the laptop beside him and shouted loudly, "Stop doing this kind of misleading behavior. I'm going to work." The short selling plan of more than $140 billion is not as simple as you think. I know, but I'm ordering you now as your boss. Today is a day off and neither you nor Cedric can work. Go, take a good shower, and change your clothes. I'll take you somewhere. Carol snatched the other person's notebook again and threw it aside casually, with an extremely lonely and excited expression on his face. He said this in a weird tone. Chapter 308, a unique, dilapidated shop. What on earth is Carol doing? Why hasn't he come back for so long? And do we have to eat here? I thought the surprise he was talking about was the delicious food he cooked himself. Tom's Eats and Treats in Brooklyn, New York. Cedric and Kevin Lestrange sitting quietly on both sides of a dining table by the window. The street outside the window was deserted, with only a few passers-by on the dim street. Most of them kept their heads down and remained silent, hiding their figures in the darkness. A hot wave of spicy spices and the aroma of grilled meat hits you in the restaurant. The whole store is simply decorated, with a few old photos depicting Indian street markets hung randomly on the walls under the dim light. Several worn wooden tables are scattered in the small space. An old color TV was hung in the upper left corner of the restaurant. The TV signal didn't seem to be very good. The TV news program was always interrupted by the host's words. There were no other customers in the restaurant, except Cedric and his companion. The owner was sitting by the oven behind the bar. He seemed to be a middle-aged Indian black mixed-race man, with a complexion that looked like a blend of late night and dawn. His movements were practiced and graceful, as he flipped hot dogs on the grill, and smeared homemade curry sauce on hamburgers. The hot dogs here are different from the simple fast food that people usually think of. They are coated with a layer of fragrant curry powder. The thick beef patties sizzle on the grill, emitting a mouth-watering aroma. But the sauce didn't look very appetizing, and the boss's behavior could hardly be called clean and hygienic. Is it really okay to eat this kind of food? I saw the boss skillfully put his fingers into the sauce, and when he pulled them out, he put them into his mouth to take a sip. Cedric felt his stomach churning. He now seriously doubted whether this store had obtained a food safety and hygiene license. I think your worries are unnecessary. Kevin Lestrange, who was sitting opposite him, you should worry about how we are going to pay for this meal. If Karl doesn't come back, I hope we can accept credit cards here. As he said this, his eyes were fixed on the color TV hanging from the ceiling in the upper left corner of the shop. The reporter from the news TV station inside was excitedly reporting financial news, and it was obvious that they were only a dozen kilometers away from this small shop. On Wall Street, which symbolizes the financial heart of the entire world, a carnival party is being held in a high-end office building. People are celebrating the birth of another company with a market value of 4,000 billion. In the office, a beautiful woman wearing a hot bikini is standing on the desk and twisting her body wantonly to show off her hot body. The Wall Street elites, who are usually well dressed, are now just a group of animals addicted to alcohol and beauty. In the clean and tidy office building, casually discarded bow ties and some underwear that is not suitable for children can be seen everywhere. Expensive champagne, like a string of burning firecrackers, keeps making popping sounds, and the amber liquid flows with the most direct desires of human beings. We can see that the fund managers of the investment department are having a party in the headquarters building of Goldman Sachs Bank, according to information obtained by this station. Goldman Sachs has gained the greatest benefit in this first world financial war. They bought 5% of Matt's shares circulating in the stock market, becoming the biggest winner in the battle for shares. It is reported that since its listing, the stock has maintained an extremely high increase for a month, with an average daily increase of more than 15%. The market is still optimistic about the company's market value, and many experts predict that the company's stock will rise again after the first product is launched on the market. These people deserve to die. They are so greedy that they will go to hell. But I'm really jealous when I see them making money. If I had known this earlier, I would have sold this store and bought shares in that so-called technology company. Maybe now I can go back to India and marry a few more wives. Cedric and Kevin Lestrange turned their heads at the same time, only to find that their boss had walked up to them without them noticing. In his hands was a plate of tempting hot dogs and hamburgers. Looks good. Cedric looked at the plate of hamburgers and hot dogs and smelled a strong scent of tropical spices with a slight movement of his nose. Looking at the hot dog covered with curry powder and the beef burger with curry and Indian coriander, he seemed to have forgotten what he had just said. The only thing in his mind was to quickly taste this unique delicacy. As for whether it would give him diarrhea, that was a problem that only Cedric, who was full, would have to consider. He was very hungry now. You're a loser. Kane Lestrange cursed unhappily at the idiot, who kept swallowing his saliva. Then he looked up at the boss and asked with some hesitation, "Excuse me, can you accept credit cards here? We don't have any cash." "Swipe the card. You are such a funny kid. Your question is like asking me whether I can get rich through hard work." The boss speaks English with a strong curry accent. Kevin Lestrange was confused after hearing this. "What do you mean by that? Don't you understand? That's impossible." The Boss made a joke and instantly laughed, stretched out his dark palm, patted the two men on the shoulders, then waved and walked towards the bar. You two enjoy your meal. White boy Karl is very reputable on this street. It doesn't matter if you don't have money. Just leave after eating. But I don't think he will abandon you two. As he said this, the boss walked to the middle of the bar, continued his cooking work, and gave a thumbs up with a meaningful expression to the two boys sitting by the window point on the other side. As soon as Cedric saw the boss leave, he couldn't wait to grab a hamburger and a hot dog, and started eating point. As soon as he took a bite, Cedric felt that he had indeed had a preconceived idea. Point. The burgers here are made from carefully selected beef patties, which are crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, and rich in juice. Every bite is full of meaty flavor, served with homemade sauces and fresh vegetables. He couldn't help but take one bite after another, and in less than a few seconds he swallowed the whole hamburger into his stomach. Then his target turned to the hot dog. He took a bite, and was instantly overwhelmed by the enchanting taste. The taste is really unique. The sausage skin is crispy and the meat is tender. It is paired with a secret sauce that has a moderate sweet and sour taste and just the right amount of spiciness. It is full of tropical feeling and is unforgettable. It looks like you guys enjoyed your meal. Just as Cedric was about to steal the second meal, Kevin Lestrange had just taken the first burger. The bell behind the shop door rang, and Carol walked in carrying a black handbag, looking at the two with a smile on his face. Chapter 309 Memories that can never be expressed. Carol, where have you been? Why did you come just now? We too have been waiting for you so anxiously. As soon as Karl sat down, Cedric couldn't wait to express his concern. I can see that you are in a hurry. If I had been a second later, my hamburger and hot dog might have already entered your stomach. Karl smiled and pushed the plate of hot dogs and hamburgers in Cedric's direction. Eat. I won't restrict your calorie intake today. After all, today is a day worth being happy about. It's only right to indulge and celebrate once in a while. Really? Cedric's eyes lit up instantly, and he held the hamburger and hot dog meal tightly with both hands. After seeing Karl nod, he couldn't wait to devour the food. What day is it today, and why are you acting so strange? Compared to Cedric, who focused all his attention on the food, Kevin Lestrange seemed more curious about what was so special about this special day that the other party mentioned. So he stopped Karl, who was about to order 2 more meal sets, and asked him in a persistent manner, even if we made a lot of money today, compared to your past achievements, the money, although huge, is probably not worth your attention. You certainly won't celebrate this achievement. As for other reasons, I'm sorry to say that I don't understand them, because from what I've gathered, you're a staunch atheist, and even though you grew up in the United States, you don't have any religious beliefs, and today is not an important holiday, so I want to ask why. And about the short selling plan, we need to hurry up because today is my birthday, Carol said with a smile, his tone unusually gentle. Kevin Lestrange, who had been chattering non-stop, was stunned for a moment, looked at the other party in disbelief and asked, what did you say? Today is my birthday. The definition of birthday should be the same all over the world. Carol still had a smile on his face and his tone was still so gentle. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Kevin Lestrange apologized immediately, as if he suddenly thought of something. He stared at Cedric, who had his mouth full of curry sauce, with a very unfriendly look. That look clearly said, you bastard, you clearly knew how important today was, but you didn't even tell me. Cedric felt very aggrieved and ashamed when he was stared at like this. He looked at Karl. Carol waved his hand between the two of them and said with a smile on his face, don't look at each other like that, Mr. Lestrange. There is no need for you to blame Mr. Diggory. In fact, he doesn't know what day it is today, or more than a year ago. Even I didn't know the exact day I was born. I also learned my exact date of birth from a certain irresponsible handsome old man, so I made some special plans, hoping to be able to say goodbye on such a special day. Farewell. Kevin Lestrange withdrew his gaze from interrogating Cedric and looked at Cole with some confusion. Is there anything else you need to say goodbye to? Although I can't understand your past, I can't make too many comments on your life, but I think from any perspective, your life now is successful enough. You have a handsome appearance and a young body, an extraordinary talent that countless people desire but cannot obtain, and a huge fortune that ordinary people cannot earn in their lifetime. Is there anything else you want to say goodbye to? Yeah. Karl nodded silently, but did not say what he wanted to say goodbye to. That was a memory he could not tell anyone in this world. That was a memory he had hidden in the deepest part of his memory palace. In that memory, there was no extremely handsome blonde boy. There was just a fat, ordinary looking oriental teenager who stayed in a dark internet cafe with no air conditioning and dim lighting. Operating an old broken computer. He used software to change the skin of a scarecrow character that symbolizes horror in a MOBA game. Manipulate the opponent to the river and finally press the R key to release the ultimate move. This series of operations seemed strange and abnormal in the eyes of others, but only the young man knew that what he wanted to hear was just the word coming from the headphones. The character screamed out in a very hoarse voice, "Happy birthday." There was no cake, no birthday party, no smiling friends, and no gifts filling the room. There is only extreme loneliness and helplessness. The pair of tired eyes reflected on the old computer screen slowly overlapped with a pair of beautiful blue eyes. Karl woke up from his memories and gave a meaningful bitter smile. He did not answer Cedric and Kevin Lestrange's curiosity, but snapped his fingers happily at the Indian boss, Raj. "But, bring me a few more sets. I must make sure my guests are well fed on my birthday. Fill our bellies with delicious food. I'm going to spend some money today." It's been a long time since anyone has spoken my Indian name. When the Indian boss heard what Karl said, he was obviously stunned for a second. Then he showed a silly but meaningful smile and gave him a thumbs up. He immediately started cooking, putting hot dogs and steaks on the grill. The strong smell of spices began to permeate the small shop. "Hurry up and eat. Don't worry, you will definitely eat your fill today." After ordering the dishes, Karl looked at the two people who had been staring at him without taking any action. He opened the backpack that was still covered in mud and showed the contents to the two people. "Don't worry, I have enough money here to pay for it. Cash is good." Cedric nodded foolishly. "This money must be very important to you." Kevin Lestrange glared at the guy and then pointed at the backpack. "The dirt on it is very fresh. It must have just been dug out from some flat ground, but the style of the backpack is only popular 5 or 6 years ago. More importantly, the money inside." I took a quick look and saw that it was all small denomination bills of $5 and $20. There were even a few $1 bills. "This must not be the money you earned recently. You left to look for this backpack, so this money must be very important to you. You are so smart, Mr. Lestrange." Karl sighed and shook his head. "Sometimes I really wish you weren't so smart. Can you please finish this meal quietly? Just celebrate for me. Don't worry, the money is clean." Chapter 310 Karl 039's birthday gift. "What do you mean?" Kevin Lestrange looked doubtful while holding a burger in his hand. "Yes, there's nothing dirty about money. If it gets dirty, can't you just wash it?" Cedric, chewing his burger in big mouthfuls, also expressed his opinion. "This cleanliness is more of a moral issue." Karl took the freshly made hamburgers and hot dogs from the boss. While distributing the food to the two people in front of him, he explained calmly, "This money was earned through my labor before I discovered my magical talent. It is more in line with the public's morals about making money. There is no legal issue involved here. It's more of a psychological idea. This store is also an old acquaintance of mine in my past life. It's the only place where we can get cheap eat and not suffer the ill will of some people." Karl spoke very easily and strangely, and Cedric didn't understand at all, or he didn't intend to understand at all. The burger full of tropical spicy flavor was a feast for the taste buds that he had never experienced before. The only thing he wanted to do now was to quickly put the food in front of him into his stomach. As for whether he would have diarrhea tomorrow and whether he would suffer when he had diarrhea, those were issues that Cedric needed to consider tomorrow. On the other side, Kevin Lestrange was holding the Han in his hand, but had no intention of speaking. He looked straight at Carol, and after a full minute of silence, he suddenly spoke. "I Don't know if it's my illusion or something else, but I always feel like this is a special farewell ceremony. You are trying to say goodbye to a certain part of your life, but I need to remind you that human life is limited and all living things will eventually die. No matter how great the magic is, it cannot reverse time. Instead of saying goodbye and running away, it is better to face it calmly. Thank you for your advice. Karl responded with a kind smile and reached out to take the cold hamburger from the other person's hand. He handed over a freshly made burger. Rather than discussing these life philosophies, shouldn't you feast on your meal and celebrate for me with the joy of enjoying delicious food? That's right. Why are you saying so many incomprehensible words? These things are really delicious. I'm not kidding you. Cedric also came over to help, and he even put a hot dog from his plate on Kevin Lestrange's plate. Kevin Lestrange looked at the steaming hamburger in his hand and the longing expression on the big-headed idiot's face beside him. I could only sigh helplessly. Stop thinking about those messy things and take a big bite of the burger. The aroma of beef combined with the spiciness of curry really gives you a sense of pleasure that goes straight to the top of your head. After that feeling of pleasure, an intense burning sensation began to fill his mouth and his face began to turn red visibly. Finally he couldn't bear it any longer, and he shouted, while fanning his mouth frantically with his hands, "It's so hot. So hot. So hot. Quickly bring me some ice water. Oh, N_N. Oh." Seeing his embarrassed look, Cedric finally couldn't help laughing, and at the same time, snatched the ice water handed over by the boss. He tilted his head back and drank it all in one gulp. Only then did Kevin Lestrange realize that the lips of this pumpkin-headed idiot had already turned red from the spicy taste. "You actually plotted against me," he shouted angrily, but this only resulted in the two of them laughing even more happily. After laughing, Karl handed him a glass of ice water, patted his shoulder and spoke in a deep voice. "For such embarrassing times, it is better to face them calmly, rather than say goodbye and escape." Hearing this, Kevin Lestrange's face turned even redder, and it was unclear whether it was because of the spicy taste, or because he was shy. But even so, Kevin Lestrange did not get angry or upset. He continued to eat with relish, enjoying this delicacy that he had never enjoyed before. Under the flickering lights, the three teenagers sat there quietly, neither chatting nor making any noise. Everyone quietly finished the food on their plates, watching the old TV hanging from the ceiling. The financial news channel was still broadcasting, and the host on TV looked radiant. He even boldly admitted that he had also purchased shares of Map Magic Technology Company. We can see that according to the forecasts of the most authoritative companies, the rise of this stock has almost stabilized, but in the coming week, there will still be a strong growth trend and market confidence remains very sufficient. Today is Victory Day on Wall Street. The host spoke all kinds of exaggerated words, and behind his words was the center of Wall Street Financial City more than 10 kilometers away. I wonder how many investment banks are holding meetings all night long, and how many fund managers are celebrating their victories in high-end bars in the Brooklyn neighborhoods tens of kilometers away. There are only dim lights and dirty restaurants and the flashing lights and whistling sirens in the distance. Heaven and hell can coexist in one city. This is truly a miracle of capital. Karl wiped the corner of his mouth with the tablecloth, took out a cigarette from his arms, and put it in his mouth, puffing out smoke, while holding his head high and sighing. "Why, Mr. Hohenzollern, are you in the mood to make some philosophical remarks?" As soon as Karl's words came out, he was immediately teased by Kevin Lestrange, but the teasing was not very harmful. Especially when paired with his lips that were a little red and swollen from the spiciness. It even looks a little funny. "Don't be so harsh, Mr. Lestrange." Karl threw the cigarette butt in his hand to the ground and stomped it out with his foot. He stood up and took the bag of money to find the boss to settle the bill. Without any nonsense, he just threw the bag to the other party. Then he said loudly, "This is the cost of today's meal. The rest is all your tip. After all, we've been sitting here for so long. Thank you for your service. I'm afraid it will be hard to see you in the future, white boy." Karl, the boss, took the black backpack and didn't check how much money was inside. He just looked at Karl and said with a sigh. Karl just spread his hands turned around and walked to Kevin Lestrange, and turned his wrist slightly, to reveal a brand new watch point. He tapped the glass of his watch with his fingers, and said with an uncharacteristically cold expression, 6 hours, 1 hour, 6 minutes, 60 seconds. Call your fund manager, or operate it yourself on the computer. On average it was about 10 seconds, which means I delayed their plans for 6 hours, and gave them 6 chances to save their fortunes. This is my birthday gift to them. If they continue to be stubborn, it has nothing to do with me. As he spoke, Karl suddenly made the sign of the cross on his chest like a devout Christian, and then patted Kevin Lestrange on the shoulder. Mr. Lestrange, your vacation is over. Start your work. Yes, my lord. Kevin Lestrange stood up slightly, and like the knights in the movies, he bent his body slightly, and placed his right hand on his chest point. He saluted Cole with a knight's salute, then dialed a number on his cell phone that he had prepared long ago. The call was connected in less than a second, without any greetings, only a cold command, start. Dumping the market and short selling. Chapter 311 Midnight Talk. Dong 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 dong. The anxious knock on the door reached Daniel Harvey's ears, but it made him feel relieved. He quickly stood up from his seat and drank the glass of wine in front of him that was mixed with sedatives and sleeping pills. I changed into loose pajamas, threw back the quilt, and lay back on the bed, turned off the lights, and waited quietly for the medicine to take effect. The knocking stopped for a while, and then started again. 3 minutes later he was already half asleep at this point, so he pressed the light switch again and slowly sat up from the bed. Looking at the luxurious 5-star hotel decoration in front of him, he gave a meaningful smile and shouted loudly, "What's the matter? Look at the time now. If it's not urgent, we can talk about it tomorrow morning." Sir, I have something very urgent to tell you." The voice of driver Macduff came from outside the door. "This is a matter of life and death for your company. The downstairs is already full of reporters. It's a big problem, sir. These reporters are so boring. Don't they need to rest and sleep? What a bunch of stupid sons of bitches." Daniel Harvey cursed out loud, then staggered out of bed, walked to the door and opened it. "Sir, something terrible has happened." The driver, Macduff, rushed in as soon as the door opened, then immediately closed and locked it. His face was half filled with an anxious expression. "Don't be so flustered, young man. Sit down and have a glass of wine. How about sherry?" The effect of the drug on Daniel Harvey had begun to take full effect. With a hint of drunkenness on his face, he pulled the young driver to the balcony of the room. He forced the other person to sit down in his seat and walked to the wine cabinet nearby and took out a bottle of sherry and 2 square whiskey glasses. After pouring a full glass for both of them, he staggered over with 2 glasses of wine and stuffed one of them directly into the other person's hand. He held up another glass and clinked it with the other person's. "Whatever happened, it's no big deal. Drink something and calm down. We farmers in Texas know it. If a storm does come, no matter how anxious an individual is, they can't save the crops in the fields. The real solution is to seal the windows, have a good dinner, and get drunk. Sir, there is really a problem." The driver Macduff seemed a little helpless, and he took a sip of the wine in the glass. Then he took a deep breath and slowly calmed down under the effect of alcohol. Just now, the MIT Information and Decision Systems Laboratory suddenly published an article in an authoritative journal. What does this have to do with us? Could it be that the article has some shocking effect? Daniel Harvey had a look of disdain on his face. He sat on a single leather sofa with his legs crossed, savoring the wine in his glass. "If it's just an academic article, it doesn't matter." Driver Macduff became anxious again. He took another sip of the sherry in the glass and said anxiously, "But this article is not an academic article at all. It's more like a scientific attack article." They cited numerous arguments, using the most scientific and rigorous method, in an attempt to prove the validity of Mr. Hohenzollern's Mad Magic Technology Company. "It's nothing more than a complete capital scam. You've had too much to drink, young man." Daniel Harvey laughed disdainfully and said sarcastically, "I didn't expect you to be so bad at drinking. What proof do they have? Doesn't he have any actual evidence? Besides, they are just a bunch of nerds in the laboratory. How can they prove our technology? They don't even have a sample of our technology. Not before The driver, Macduff, was about to cry and took out a document and a photo from behind him. He threw the two things on the small table in front of them, pointed at the photos on it and spoke anxiously. But didn't you give that phone to the college student? After he returned to MIT, I was immediately admitted as a graduate student by the laboratory's doctoral supervisor, and at the same time began to study the phone. Based on their research, they concluded that this is the most advanced cutting-edge scientific research technology available today, and the most advanced supporting industrial chain on the planet is unable to mass produce that kind of mobile phone. Do you know what this means? Has this kid lost his conscience after studying so much? Daniel Harvey seemed to sober up instantly and held the wine glass tightly in his right hand. His knuckles turned white from exerting too much force, and then he stood up suddenly and threw the wine glass in his hand to the ground. The sound of breaking glass was like a gunshot, accompanied by a roar at the top of one's voice. What does this mean? Doesn't this guy have any business sense at all? Doesn't he know any hardware devices that are not made public by any commercial company? Everything is kept strictly confidential, right? MIT, right? Their behavior is enough to make their school pay a heavy price for it. Contact the legal department immediately. I will sue them until their laboratory is bankrupt. This shameful betrayal must be paid for. That's not a problem. Driver Macduff stood up and tried to calm the furious Daniel Harvey while reminding him, "Sir, you still don't understand. The most important thing right now is not to sue that laboratory. Instead, we need to take immediate action to stabilize market confidence. Otherwise the stock market will open tomorrow. Your company's stock price will suffer unimaginable losses and may even directly trigger the circuit breaker mechanism." What? Daniel Harvey finally showed a hint of nervousness on his face. He looked at the other party in panic and asked tentatively, "It's impossible. Even if the current stock price is a little inflated, how could one article have such a big impact? Besides, our company still has your bank's non-convertible share futures investment. Even with these tens of billions of cash, it is also enough to stabilize the stock price in the short term. Even if there is a decline, it will only return to the rational level of the market. Are you a little afraid of sounding too alarmist, sir?" The driver Macduff was really a little tired. He looked at the other party helplessly and said with a sigh, "If it was a normal market environment, the situation would certainly not have become so serious in an instant, but it just happened. Several small short-selling companies have joined together and suddenly issued a joint statement, hoping to short your company's stock now. According to information from our company, they have already acquired 5% of the shares from Goldman Sachs and several other investment banks. Once they start selling, the consequences will be disastrous. This is a premeditated attack." Chapter 312. Play within a play in betting. What? A trace of fear finally appeared on Daniel Harvey's face, and his body couldn't help but start to tremble. He walked to the wine cabinet tremblingly and poured himself 3 glasses of sherry. Only after he finished the 3 glasses of wine did his body gradually stabilize. He looked at the driver Macduff and asked in a pleading tone, "What should we do now? Mr. Hohenzollern will need at least half a month, which means he can only come to New York 1 or 2 days before Christmas. How much do you expect our stock market value to drop in the next half month?" "You are saying that Mr. Hohenzollern does have the ability to mass produce that type of mobile phone?" "This is not a lie, driver." Macduff did not answer his question directly, but asked a question in return. "Of course." Daniel Harvey shouted anxiously, using his hands and feet to explain. "The entire European industrial chain cooperates with this phone, and the core chip is produced in the UK, but the scale of the factory is very small now. The monthly output may not reach 10,000 units, but it is definitely possible to mass produce. It's just that the production lines in Germany and France have not yet entered production. The funds raised from this listing are being continuously remitted to those places once the production lines start. As long as the core chip problem is solved, there will be no problem in large-scale mass production." When saying this, Daniel Harvey looked like a child whose candy had been taken away, with an expression of panic and pain on his face. But when he said these words, he always looked intentionally or unintentionally at the foot of his bed, or some hidden place. "Then there's no problem. Driver Macduff was much calmer, but he seemed to be looking for something as well. He paced back and forth on the balcony, looking for something out of the corner of his eye. As long as the real production problem is not a lie, everything can be solved, and our company will fully assist your company, holding the stock price during this difficult time. Thank you so much. Daniel Harvey shook hands with him excitedly, his face full of gratitude. But you now have an urgent problem that needs to be solved, Driver Macduff suddenly spoke calmly during the handshake. The reporters downstairs have been waiting for a long time. We must come out immediately to calm people down. Of course. Daniel Harvey nodded silently, but at the same time a trace of embarrassment and anxiety appeared on his face. Don't worry, sir. I will teach you a few simple techniques, but we are short on time, so let's go downstairs first. The driver, Mitchy Leif, seemed to see the uneasiness in the other person's heart, and while speaking comforting words, he led the other person out of the room. The moment the door closed, the power was automatically cut off, and the entire room was shrouded in darkness again, until countless tiny red spots of light appeared. It gradually emerged from the hidden corners of the room. In the VIP elevator, Daniel Harvey leaned against the wall of the elevator, and the anxious expression on his face disappeared without a trace in an instant. He pulled out a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes from his pocket, put it casually between his lips, then took out another one and handed it to the young man in front of him. At the same time he asked casually, "There's no fire alarm in this elevator, right? And how was my performance just now? Acting is really not a human job. If I had to choose again, I would go back to Texas and farm. That's probably a big loss." Driver Macduff smiled slightly and waved his right hand gently. A white fluorescent light began to spread from his body until the entire elevator space was covered, and at the same time he took out a Zippo lighter from his pocket. He lit a cigarette for the other person himself, and then lit one for himself. Let the legendary wizard light my cigarette. How could I have imagined such a scene half a month ago? Daniel Harvey took a deep puff of the cigarette in his hand, raised his head and exhaled slowly. There is no such thing as a wizarding legend. I'm your driver now, and everything I do is to serve you. The driver, Mitchy Leif, held a cigarette in his mouth and gave a calm smile. Daniel Harvey simply disdained this and asked casually while smoking a cigarette, "When I heard the news, I was so nervous that I couldn't sleep. I remembered all those scenes before you came to my room. I guess he hasn't been seen. That's natural. The people behind the scenes only see what they want to see. Your performance is excellent enough without any flaws. So, do you think J. Morgan Chase will cooperate with us? I need to remind you, sir, that my company will only cooperate with your company to maintain market stability and avoid illegal activities such as speculative short selling. As for the rest, they are just the imagination of some bored people. You are really flawless." Daniel Harvey looked at the handsome young man in a pure black suit through the smoke of cigarettes. There is an indescribable feeling. The other party's current image and state are like the raven in the cemetery, extremely intelligent but with an ominous aura. "Thank you for the compliment." The driver, Macduff, continued to smile. Even when he was smoking, his body stood straight like a statue. The signal light slowly descended from the 39th floor. Looking at the flashing numbers on the panel, Daniel Harvey threw the cigarette, butt in his hand to the ground, suddenly looked at the other party, and said with a smile, "It's about 30 seconds until we get to the first floor. Let's make a bet. Your boss will call you within 1 second. If I lose, how about we find a free time 3 days before Christmas, and I'll take you to a nice place in New York for a drink." "What? If I lose?" Driver Macduff bent down, picked up the other party's discarded cigarette butt and put it in a sealed plastic bag. At the same time, take out a roll of tape and carefully remove all the scattered cigarette ashes around. Looking at the other party's professional actions like those of an agent, Daniel Harvey's eyes twitched wildly, and he said in a sarcastic tone, "If you weren't a wizard who could perform magic, I would have suspected that you were a robot, right? If you lost, we're going to drink there too. What's the point of winning or losing?" After cleaning up all the traces, Driver Macduff looked up at the other party with some confusion. Daniel Harvey gave a meaningful smile and patted the other person's shoulder. "Of course it makes sense, young man. Drinking is not the purpose. Who pays is the purpose of this bet. Ding, beep, beep, beep. While the two were talking, the elevator had already reached its final destination. At the same time, the driver Macduff's cell phone rang in his pocket. Listening to the beeping sound of his vibrating cell phone, Daniel Harvey smiled smugly. Looks like I won the bet. Don't forget the 3 days before Christmas. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 313, What is Professionalism? As he spoke, Daniel Harvey walked directly out of the elevator, leaving the other person alone. The driver, Macduff, did not refuse the kindness. He took out his cell phone and answered the call. He listened to the order conveyed by the other end of the phone and responded calmly, "Yes, no problem. I have been by his side the whole time, and I can personally vouch for everything I have heard. Of course I'm responsible for my loyalty, no matter when and where. This is indeed an opportunity, and the short selling window can probably last until 2 or 3 days around Christmas. That is, in about 2 weeks. The estimated loss of market value is about 85%, and the profit margin is about 370%. After reporting the numbers, he slowly walked out of the elevator and saw that Daniel Harvey did not go far, but was waiting for him at a corner. Seeing him coming, Daniel Harvey shook his head and sighed. 85% market value loss, 370% profit. Is this Wall Street? It's really scary just to hear it. Do you know how many ordinary people who followed the trend and spent all their money to buy this stock will lose all their wealth overnight in these 2 weeks? Are you really not afraid of going to hell for doing this kind of work? We are already in hell, sir. Already, driver. Macduff spoke calmly. The two smiled at each other and said no more, walking towards the hotel entrance, which was already crowded. Mr. Daniel Harvey, could you explain in detail the recent issues regarding your company's alleged financial fraud? Mr. Daniel Harvey, what do you think of the professional paper published by MIT? Is it true that the mobile phone cannot be manufactured? Mr. Daniel Harvey, regarding the recent rumors and Mr. Hohenzollern, the founder of your company, who has not appeared in public for over a month, how should this matter be explained? Is this a serious financial fraud? While the two were still walking, the reporters, who had been crowded together for a long time, rushed towards them, regardless of the security guards at the door trying to stop them. Countless flashes lit up at the same time, illuminating the magnificent hotel lobby like the center of a storm. Those flashes of light were like streaks of lightning in the sky, foreshadowing the impending storm in the financial industry. Please keep your distance, otherwise we will take tough measures, and this is definitely not just talk. Any interview must comply with regulations. I must be responsible for the lives of my leaders. The driver, Mitchie Leif, shouted and silenced the reporters who were talking incessantly and trying to get closer at the same time. He waved his hands, and a group of bodyguards in black rushed out from the corners around him. He forced the group of reporters back and faced the reporters who were disobedient and tried to approach Daniel Harvey. The driver, Macduff, raised his hand and fired a stun gun, looking at his colleague who was lying on the ground, twitching and incontinent. It was not until then that the reporters realized that the young and handsome man in front of them was dressed like a black crow. It was not just talk. Most of them consciously followed the guidance of the bodyguards and slowly retreated. However, even at this time, most of the reporters were still desperately pointing their cameras at the tabloid reporter, who was lying on the ground, twitching and incontinent. For them, this is also excellent news material. As for whether their colleagues have been attacked, what bullshit. Any colleagues in the news industry are competitors until there was a safe distance of at least 3 meters between the reporter and Daniel Harvey. The driver, Macduff, nodded to him, indicating that he could answer the question. Hello, all the elites in the news industry. I just got a rough idea of what happened tonight through my secretary. Before answering your questions. I need to emphasize that for any technology company conducting dissection research and publishing on products that have not yet been publicly launched is an unacceptable leak of information. I have contacted the corporate legal department and will file a lawsuit against MIT regarding my personal mistakes. I will report my work to Mr. Hohenzollern, the company's CEO and chairman of the board. If you have any questions, you can ask them now. Here, I have a problem. The New York Times has questions. The noisy environment sounded again, and this time Daniel Harvey did not give the initiative to the other party. He stretched out his hand to signal. First, I would like to invite the reporter from the New York Times to ask questions. Hello, Mr. Daniel Harvey. I'm honored to have the opportunity to ask questions. You just mentioned the mysterious Mr. Hohenzollern. According to our understanding, this gentleman has not appeared in public since the global press conference in early November. There are all kinds of rumors circulating on the internet and on the streets, and they deeply suspect that Mr. Hohenzollern is just an excellent actor. He was the one who led this shocking scam and even participated in the fraud in the US election. My goodness, this first question is aimed at costing lives. Daniel Harvey looked at the New York Times reporter in front of him. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional, but he also knew how to deal with these people. He just spoke calmly. First of all, we must make it clear that Mr. Hohenzollern is an American citizen. He has rights granted by the Constitution that cannot be deprived by anyone. There is absolutely no need for him to tell anyone about his whereabouts and other privacy. But from what I understand, everything is running smoothly at the company now, and he has performed his duties as the company's CEO and chairman of the board very well. There is absolutely no need to explain anything to irrelevant people. As for the so-called election fraud issue you just asked about, that's complete nonsense. Having said this, Daniel Harvey simply gave the driver MacDuff a look, and the other party immediately understood what he meant. He casually called over two of his men and had a huge map of the United States hung on a bracket and moved it in front of everyone. Then, under the watchful eyes of countless reporters and cameras, he began to rely on his memory to mark on the map with red and blue markers. This was the final outcome of the US election. Seeing this extraordinary operation, everyone present was completely stunned. Some reporters even hurriedly called their colleagues who were still at the TV station to inquire. The final result was that the result drawn by the other party was exactly the same. The noisy crowd fell silent. They looked in disbelief at the map of the United States covered with red and blue markings. No one has raised any questions. So it seems that there is nothing wrong with the map drawn by my secretary. I can continue my speech. Looking at the silent crowd, Daniel Harvey smiled and spoke. Chapter 314 Class Antagonism. World famous paintings. As shown in the figure, throughout the election, the votes that President Clinton received did not come solely from the large and developed West Coast states. The Rust Belt and traditional Middle Eastern states have made their own choices in this election, just like the business that our company intends to undertake. This is a joint industrial project spanning 3 continents and 2 oceans, involving more than 40 countries and regions. We will continue to promote the situation of global manufacturing cooperation with American manufacturing as the priority, and deeply implement the economic-led political policy mentioned by President Clinton. It's not just a simple issue. Daniel Harvey opened his arms and spoke passionately in front of numerous reporters and cameras. His speech was very infectious and was an excellent political performance. But it was obvious that such a performance would not fool these experienced reporters at all. A reporter from the British BBC TV station squeezed to the front of the line with a recorder in hand. Looking at Daniel Harvey, he said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Daniel Harvey, you shouldn't be an executive at a tech company. You should run for election. If you were a British person, you could run for the House of Commons and I would vote for you. Your speech would be as good as that of Cicero, the famous orator of ancient Rome. If this were the forum of ancient Rome, I will definitely elect you as our consul. But shouldn't what we are discussing now be more of an economic issue regarding The MIT paper. Can your company provide sufficient evidence to prove that the paper is nothing but a hypothesis that was fabricated out of thin air? Your company is still capable of providing sufficiently excellent products in the future. Daniel Harvey looked at the BBC reporter, took a deep breath, pretended to be annoyed, and scolded loudly. Sir, first of all, I didn't ask you to ask questions. Secondly, I'm the financial director of the company. That article is mainly technical, and with my knowledge, I cannot refute it. But, as I have stressed before, this is a serious leak and the leaker will be severely punished. I have already informed, but you still didn't answer my question directly. The BBC reporter said firmly, we are discussing whether your company can produce such products in the future, and whether this involves false advertising and financial fraud. Just 12 hours ago, when the closing bell on Wall Street rang, your company had become the fastest multinational corporation to reach billion. $400 billion is a huge sum of money that others cannot imagine. It includes all the assets of many investors. Shouldn't you say something to calm the current restless market confidence and avoid unnecessary stock market fluctuations? Are ordinary people's savings really worthless in the eyes of you elites? As he spoke, the reporter became more and more emotional, and the last few words were basically shouted out. The sound continued to echo in the hotel lobby. When other reporters saw this scene, they turned their cameras and tried to capture the images of both people in the same photo. Compared to stories like the alleged financial fraud, this is a confrontation between an ordinary reporter and the Wall Street elite. Obviously, it is more interesting and explosive. These reporters know very well that they should not choose the right one or the expensive one. The news industry will always choose the one with the highest traffic. Like I just said, I'm just a financial executive. Daniel Harvey pretended to be calm and restrained, and continued to repeat his previous words calmly. Answer me, is this a scam? Can the product you showed me before be mass produced? Just answer yes or no. It's such a simple question. Don't the core decision makers of the company have any information at all? One word from you can decide the life and death of thousands of families. Why are you unwilling to speak out? Is it that difficult? The BBC reporter went completely crazy, yelling heart-wrenchingly, his face turning red with excitement, like a raging baboon. His eyeballs were bloodshot due to congestion, and his hair and beard, which had not been trimmed for many days, made him look very sloppy. Wearing a cheap, faded t-shirt, he craned his neck and yelled at a Wall Street elite wearing a haute couture suit and a solid gold watch. One stands in the bright golden light, the other is covered by the shadows of the crowd, not to mention the human wall of security guards in front of them. A perfect photo, with class divisions, angry emotions, and inhumane calmness. The light and shadow structure is also perfect. After a burst of flashes, the scene was frozen in a photograph, and the reporter who took the photo was admiring the picture in his camera. Trembling with excitement, he had already begun to fantasize about this year's Princeton prize. Just as he was immersed in his fantasy, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Damn you guys, you damn vampires, you told us, when we bought it, that it was absolutely safe and low risk. I put my daughter's college tuition into this, and now what? You're going to go to hell. You're going to go to hell. It turned out that the BBC reporter had completely lost control of his emotions and tried to pounce on Daniel Harvey in the distance. But he was stopped by the black-clad bodyguards, who punched the guy directly in the stomach and then tackled him to the ground. Then he knelt on the other person's neck and tied up his wrists with a plastic restraint belt. Jesus. God, thank you for your gift. I will have 2 photos that will go down in history. At the moment the riot broke out, countless reporters rushed over with video cameras and recorded everything in front of them from every angle. Daniel Harvey left the scene in a panic, escorted by his driver Macduff and bodyguards. At the same time, outside New York City, in an open grassland, a small screen was broadcasting live images. This is quite confusing, Cedric said with a frown. You really picked a good person. With this performance, the stock may directly trigger the circuit breaker mechanism tomorrow. It seems that it will not take 2 weeks. It will probably only take 8 or 9 days to complete the task. Kevin less strange, on the other hand, looked at the problem from a completely different perspective. Karl, who was lying on the ground with his mobile phone in his hand, turned his head slightly to look into the eyes of the two people beside him, then said with a smile, "There's no need to finish the task so early. We have to share some of the soup with the meat. Didn't that gentleman make a bet with him? It's a good day to have the third day before Christmas, so let's make a happy decision." Chapter 315. Financial Questions. Mr. Damon is not young anymore, but he is still willing to appear on a financial show at a time like this. I really admire him. In the penthouse suite at the Plaza Hotel in New York, Daniel Harvey lay in the jacuzzi in the middle of the living room, looking at the financial channel on the giant LCD screen in front of me. The energetic old man is talking, faced with various tricky questions from the host. It can be said that the answers were very appropriate, but even so, the host did not seem to intend to let the other party go and continued to ask a few key questions. 2 weeks had passed since that dawn interview at the hotel. It was December, and Manhattan had been snowing heavily for several days in a row. There is a beautiful snow scene in Central Park, and the surrounding streets also look a little more romantic because of the arrival of Snow. But it's different from those young people who try to quickly build relationships with the help of snow on the streets. The entire Wall Street and the US stock market have truly experienced a cold winter. Magic Technology Company, which was highly expected, directly triggered the circuit breaker mechanism the moment the exchange opened on the second day. The stock price fell by more than 7% within 5 minutes of opening, directly triggering the first circuit breaker. After trading was suspended for 15 minutes, the price fell another 14% when trading was restarted, triggering the second circuit breaker mechanism. Another 15 minutes later, just 30 minutes after the opening, the decline again exceeded 20%, triggering 3 circuit breakers in a single day, directly setting a historical record. Hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth disappeared without a trace in one day. This violent stock market shock affected more than just one company. Several US technology companies and many European precision manufacturing companies have previously announced their cooperation with Magic Technology. The Wall Street exchanges also experienced declines to varying degrees, and the stock market was in turmoil just 24 hours later. Just 2 weeks before Christmas, the funds of countless retail investors were declared to be zero. The governor of New York State directly declared a state of emergency. A White House press secretary also said that this was the biggest financial turmoil the United States has experienced since the Great Depression of 1929. Countless speeches and pointers seemed to announce the death sentence of this stock, as if this company was about to become a miracle company with a market value of over $4,000 billion. The fastest. It became the company that went bankrupt the fastest after going public in the United States since the 90s. At this critical moment, several well-known commercial banks, including JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and Lehman Brothers Investment Bank, issued statements at the same time. This shows that the Magic Technology Company shares they hold will definitely not participate in this sell-off. They also stated that their first round of investment was an indefinite investment in fixed assets, even if the company went bankrupt and liquidated tomorrow. The investment will not be recovered until the company's debts are paid off. Following the joint statement of these companies, the stock market finally stabilized after the stock value was only about 30% of its original peak. There has not been a large-scale decline in the past week, and the market still believes that if the company cannot prove its future capabilities in the short term, its stock price would continue to fall, and this scene on TV appeared. As the world's most famous commercial bank CEO, Jamie Dimon, was a guest on a variety financial show. I hope to explain the purpose of doing so to ordinary investors through TV programs. Mr. Jamie Dimon, you have just used very complex economic theories to explain to us why you and your company are doing this, but I think the vast majority of viewers who are watching our show simply cannot understand such profound theories. Can you tell us in detail why you did this? In such a market environment, why did you still believe in such an absurd scam? The host of the show spoke again, and it was a very young guy with a wild, colorful hairstyle point. He was wearing a tight, bright orange leather suit and looked like a fool who had been electrocuted by Pikachu. Point opposite him, Jamie Dimon was dressed like a standard gentleman in a dark custom-made three-piece suit. Point the exquisite red tie and the eyes behind the gold rimless glasses are full of sharpness. He was sitting with his arms and legs tilted, looking relaxed, and his expression gave people a gentle feeling without giving any indication of any emotional change. Point speak clearly and slowly. Let me put it this way, Jack. I know it's hard for you to understand what I just said, so I'll tell you in the simplest way. In the past 2 weeks, Morgan Chase has not sold any Magic Technology shares, and in the past 2 weeks, we have also been frantically increasing our holdings of the company's shares. The increase reached a staggering 150 million shares, or 1.5% of the company's shares. Do you understand what I want to say now? We are professional investors. I'm looking forward to the future earnings and profits of this company. We are not ordinary investors. We are already accustomed to this kind of scene. Whoa, whoa. The TV host named Jack made strange noises of surprise. Point with an exaggerated expression on his face. He looked at the handsome old man in front of him. Can I help you translate what you said? That means a leader like you who has a lot of capital and is in a high position. You can participate in this capital game because you can afford a 70% or even higher loss in stock prices because you are spending the bank's book deposits, which are not your money in the first place. Even if you don't make a penny from this investment, it still doesn't affect your travel to Hawaii, Costa Rica, the Amazon, or anywhere else. Your luxury apartments, swimming pools, and big-breasted models in Beverly Hills will not be affected. Only ordinary investors deserve to lose everything. Is that what you mean? Don't misunderstand what I just said. Jamie Dimon looked unhappy. I just want to emphasize that professional matters should be left to professionals. Stock investment is very risky, and ordinary people can easily suffer losses in it, which is definitely not what you just said. And our investment work is regulated by multiple government departments and is also subject to federal laws. Wow, that's really shocking. But no matter how much you say, we still don't have the answer to that question. Can we see the actual product of that company? Can that magical phone be mass produced? Chapter 316. Who taught you to answer questions like this? Jamie Dimon stared at the strange looking young man in front of him and said with a heavy face, "You forcefully question me like you're interrogating a criminal. It's hard not to suspect that there's someone behind this." From the Massachusetts Institute of Technology publishing the paper in the middle of the night to several small investment banks suddenly announcing that they would short Matt's stock. Then there is a series of suspicious operations in the stock market, and you're questioning of me now. These coincidences make it hard not to suspect that there is a dark hand behind the scenes. What, Mr. Damon, you can't say that. Interrupt the live broadcast immediately. A noisy sound came from the TV, and from the sound it seemed to be the director in charge of photography. Point it may be because the incident happened suddenly and he didn't have time to control his voice volume, causing his voice to be recorded by the microphone. Point with audiences from all over the United States watching. This financial variety show turned into a complete disaster. You can't interrupt the live broadcast. Can't you allow me to finish what I'm saying? I'm not an ordinary guest. If you dare to cut off the live broadcast, I think the stock of New York Times Television will also experience some small fluctuations. Point the camera at me. You want to find the answer, don't you? Well, let me speak my mind out. Full fire in the hotel. Daniel Harvey couldn't help but sigh as he watched Mr. Damon showing his might on TV. It seems that the person who can become the CEO of the world's top commercial bank is indeed a genius, at least in terms of performance. He has learned the essence and chosen the most popular style of play. This shouldn't be a performance, sir. At least we shouldn't think so when a gentleman is pushed to this level of anger. It was more of an on-air accident, the driver Macduff reminded him, but Daniel Harvey just smiled contemptuously and didn't say much. Point the two continued to focus their eyes on the TV screen. Point on the TV show. Jamie Dimon was at full tilt, delivering a polite threat. Point he took control of the rhythm of the entire show. and the host with a weird look was casually thrown aside. All the cameras were pointed at him, turning an interview program into his personal live show. Ding. The crisp sound of metallic bell rang out. Under the gaze of countless cameras and the American audience behind the scenes, Jamie Dimon skillfully took out an exquisite DuPont lighter and opened the manhole cover. In a cool manner he lit himself a Lucky Strike cigarette, and as a puff of smoke came out of his mouth, the calm voice sounded again. If there are children watching this live, please allow me to apologize to your parents, and I would also like to remind you that, in this battle with nicotine, I'm a loser, but you kids can be a winner. Let's get back to the point. What I just said is not groundless. There must be someone behind the financial crisis that has swept across the United States. This storm appeared without any warning and was so strong, and it lasted less than half a month. Nearly 300 billion of capital in the market has flowed into different accounts in various forms. I have done my best in this crisis. Slaves guarantee that investors who trust us will not suffer losses in profits, but this is what I cannot tolerate. Why did this happen? Who are the participants in this conspiracy? Having said that, Jamie Dimon put out his cigarette directly on the wooden table, turned his head slightly, and stared at the stunned host. At this time, the host was completely frightened. He usually hosts his financial variety show, and it doesn't matter what happens during the show. Ask those senior Wall Street fund managers, or some state legislators, some very excessive questions, but most of those people just laughed it off, or played it off with a giggle. No one dared to be rude to him on the show, as if as long as he got the microphone, he had the right to ask questions, no matter how tricky and harsh his questions were. The people who were asked the questions had no choice but to let him do what he asked them for the sake of their image. But now, when the old man in front of him looked at him with his sharp eyes, he finally woke up from this dream. He finally realized that in the eyes of the real big shots, he was just a weird clown. The other party could easily put him to death with just a few words, so he spoke in panic. Mr. Dimon, I have absolutely no involvement in the conspiracy you are alleging, and I wasn't even in the stock market before today's show. I have never even touched any mad company's stock or related financial derivatives. That's why I'm qualified to host this show. I have no vested interest in this incident. That's right, you have no vested interests involved. Jamie Dimon spoke calmly, his voice very low, but the people in the TV broadcast room didn't even dare to breathe. The whole room was as quiet as a soundproof room. But this does not absolve you of your guilt. The original purpose of the news industry is to safeguard citizens' forthright and the necessary right to know. But what about now? Unfounded factual reporting, exaggerated headlines, and all kinds of leading articles. From that night till now, the total number of articles published in the New York Times is about 56. If I remember correctly, in less than 2 weeks, there were 56 articles, at least 3 a day. With so many articles reporting, how much of them were true? How many of them have added fuel to the fire? As I have just emphasized, this is a disaster caused by conspiracy and human error. Does any of you dare to stand up now and refute what I said? The calm and faint voice kept echoing in the live broadcast room. The producer and director of this show looked as pale as death. He knew that his career would be completely over tonight. The blame given by the other party was too big, and he could already imagine what happened on other TV stations. Countless colleagues are watching this live broadcast with smiles on their faces, while the teams behind them are working desperately to finish the articles. It is indeed as this person said, there are no longer any truth fighters in the news industry today who dare to fight for the truth at all costs. There are more zombies waiting to take advantage of the situation. What you said has nothing to do with today's topic. I still want to ask that question. Does Mad Technology Company have the ability to mass produce that phone? Just when the director had begun to think about what to write in his resignation letter, the host wanted to make one last attempt, and he continued to ask the question emphatically. But before he could finish his words, a crisp cell phone ringtone suddenly rang. Jamie Dimon interrupted the other party's question with his hand, and then, under the gaze of everyone, he took out his mobile phone and answered it directly. Okay. No problem, I'll let them know. Oh, is that so? You really care about others, Mr. Hohenzollern? Chapter 317 Angry Working Kitten. The moment the producer-director heard the name Mr. Hohenzollern, he immediately thought of his resignation report. It was instantly torn apart, and I turned around and began to formulate my own request for promotion. Thank you for the microphone. At the same time, Mr. Jamie Dimon, who answered the phone, suddenly raised his phone and shook it in front of everyone. Mr. Hohenzollern wants to say a few words to the American audience through this program. No problem. This time no one made things difficult for him, and the production director himself held a brand new microphone. He broke into the camera lens and deliberately showed his face in front of the camera. Then he obediently placed the microphone next to the microphone of the mobile phone. Dear investors, fans of technology and our company, I thought I could take a good vacation after I got hurt accidentally. I didn't expect that so many ridiculous and tragic events would happen while I was enjoying my vacation. I'm still deep in the Rockies, but should be able to make it to New York tomorrow. After enjoying my last night of wonderful vacation life, I will put an end to this rumor once and for all. 78 hours later, I will hold my second personal speech in the square in front of the Parliament building, and at the same time, it will put an absolutely perfect end to everything that has happened recently. All doubts and conspiracies will be completely ended on that day. Thank you for your support, Mr. Dimon, and I hope you will condescend to be there that day, of course. Jamie Dimon took the phone away from the microphone and hung up the speakerphone. After exchanging pleasantries with Karl on the other end of the phone, he straightened his clothes, stood up, and glanced at the completely confused host. He then looked at the producer-director, who was still bending over with the microphone, and spoke in the same calm tone. You heard it too. I need to go back now to prepare some necessary things, so let's end the show here, sir, and I think the ratings for this show won't be too bad. You got what you wanted. Our deal is over. After saying that, he turned and left the live broadcast room. At the same time, in a cheap motorhome outside of New York, Karl hung up the phone. He casually threw his phone aside and glanced at Cedric, who was sleeping soundly on the other bed. He sighed helplessly, stood up and walked to the windowsill and poured a pot of water for the pot of orchid tulips and the kilo blue flame flower. Then he opened the door and went downstairs, where there was a very simple little bar that served cheap fried chicken and beer. Among the crowd of paunchy, casually dressed tourists, a short figure was wearing a neat black suit. Sitting in the corner of the bar, typing away on a silver grey laptop. Did you finally get that guy to sleep? I thought you were going to accompany him, but it seems I was overthinking it. Kevin Lestrange stared at the computer screen and started to speak in a sarcastic tone without even raising his head. Don't be so mean, Karl said with a smirk on his face, rubbing his hands as he handed a box of donuts to the other person. I need to. Airport rental fees, aircraft fuel refueling fees, and necessary aircraft bills have been settled. The wages of short-term pilots have been settled, and overtime wages for production lines have also been paid. We are only 1 billion short. What else do you need, Kevin? Lestrange raised his head slightly, his dark circles flashing with anger. That said, don't mess with me. No need. Karl waved his hands repeatedly, and the smile on his face became a little awkward. You do have extraordinary professional skills. It is my honor to have you manage my assets. Thank you very much. Thank me. Kevin Lestrange sneered, staring at the embarrassed Karl. So, you announced on your own that you would end this plan in 78 hours. You know what 78 hours means to me. How much more work will it add? It will take me 72 hours to safely launder all this income. That means I need to make $6 billion in the next 10 hours. You really think too highly of me, Mr. Hohenzollern. You are such a good boss. You are like a roller juicer, squeezing out all the surplus value of your employees without leaving a drop. You really opened my eyes. After saying this, Kevin Lestrange pouted, lowered his head, and continued to work, leaving Karl standing by, feeling very embarrassed. After a full half hour, Karl's feet were numb from standing, and the looks from the people around him made him very embarrassed. So he had no choice but to sit next to Kevin Lestrange. Anything else, Mr. Hohenzollern? As soon as he sat down, Kevin Lestrange glared at him. Nothing, just go to work, and don't forget to eat your donuts. You need some energy, to replenish your energy, after working so hard, Karl responded awkwardly. No need. Kevin Lestrange said proudly, I'm not some loser who only likes sweets. That kind of sweet food will only make people's character weak. If you really want to help me, please help me get a double espresso black coffee. Don't add any sugar. I need to get my spirits up and work hard right now to pay for someone's profligate bills. I absolutely will not. I made this myself. Karl suddenly said, holding a donut in his hand and putting it to his mouth. You like the lemon and citrus flavor. I didn't add too much sugar and I didn't use too much butter to knead the dough. It's more like a French croissant, but this is America after all, and we always have to experience the specialties. Kevin Lestrange's nose moved slightly, and the fresh scent of lemon and citrus made him swallow his saliva. Carol could see that the other party was already moved, but was just too embarrassed to say it out loud. So he simply broke the donut in his hand, forced half of it into the other person's mouth, and ate the other half himself, talking as he ate. Well, Mr. Lestrange, I know you are very busy and can't take your hands off the keyboard. Then let me feed you. You must replenish your energy, otherwise such an excellent employee will collapse. It's a great loss to me. In this way, the two people shared a large box of donuts in this strange posture. Then Karl sat aside doing nothing, while Kevin Lestrange continued to work hard on the computer. I don't know how much time passed until a slight snoring woke Karl from his light sleep. When he opened his eyes, he found Kevin Lestrange sleeping in his arms like a docile kitten. Looking at the cat that was still purring, Karl couldn't help but smile knowingly and reached out his hand to scratch its nose. Then, seeing that the other party had no intention of waking up, he had to take out a mobile phone from the ring with one hand and dialed the only number inside. After the call was connected, he gave the order in a very low voice. Professor Snape, you can start customizing the potion I want. Chapter 318, The Unusual Parliament Building. On December 12th. In front of the New York State Capitol. Only 3 days left until Christmas. There is a hint of chill in the early morning air. The sky is a light blue-purple. The morning glow and morning mist are intertwined, adding a gentle color to the cold winter. It's so cold. Mr. Joe Ward, the chief private secretary to the governor of New York State, clasped his hands together and blew a breath of hot air into his palms. He was a typical political elite, wearing a black tailor-made new suit, looking gentle and wearing glasses. As a senior civil servant who has worked in the state government for many years, he has a special sense of pride for this parliament building. But today, he feels that the experience he has accumulated in his past life has been seriously challenged. When he thought of this, he turned his head and looked behind him helplessly. The Parliament building stands majestically in the dim light, and its classical architectural style appears even more solemn and majestic under the morning light. But turning around, a lot of people had already gathered in the square below the steps. They were either standing or sitting, as if waiting for a ceremony to begin. From time to time, whispers and laughter could be heard from the crowd, and the atmosphere was full of anticipation and excitement. The flagpoles standing around were not hung with the American flags as usual. Instead, there were some colorful corporate advertisements, including the familiar Walmart, KFC, and some technology company advertisements that he didn't pay much attention to. Colorful flags hung around the square, making the usually solemn political occasion seem a little frivolous and strange. Why did he choose this place? We should have had a day off today. He is such a troublesome guy. Mr. Joe Ward looked at the noisy crowd and the drastically changed square around him and couldn't help but complain. As soon as he finished speaking, a stern rebuke came from behind him. Watch yourself, Mr. Jan Ward. The eyes of the entire United States, and even the world, are focused here now. If any reporter recorded what you just said, a call from Washington might come in a second. We are now standing on the edge of a cliff. If we take one step forward, we will reach heaven, but if we take one misstep, we will fall into the abyss. The person who said this is the governor of New York State, Mr. Mario Cuomo, who has a round face, thick eyebrows and deep eyes. He looks like an obese uncle who drank too much, but beneath that gentle exterior is the awe-inspiring temperament that he has acquired through years of political career. Faced with the reprimand from his direct leader, Mr. Joe Ward certainly did not dare to refute. All he could do was walk up to the other person, point, lower your voice, and gossip in the other person's ear. I heard that the FBI has been investigating him. It is said that he also grew up in New York and has close ties with that group of garbage gangs in Brooklyn. And, stop talking. Mr. Mario Cuomo rudely interrupted the other party. His eyes hidden behind black framed lenses, he stared at his personal secretary, pointed a finger at him and said, I can pretend that I never heard what you just said, and you can pretend that you never said it. Invite me a bottle of beer tonight, and the matter will be over. Don't discuss the mysterious Mr. Hohenzollern anymore. I still say that if I take one wrong step, my political career could end. Why? Joe Ward was still a little unconvinced. As a standard elite in the United States in the 80s, his life can be described as smooth sailing. He was born into a happy middle-class family. His father was a barrister and his mother was a federal government civil servant. He has been an excellent student since childhood, joined the school team in high school, and achieved excellent results, and successfully became the most handsome boy at the graduation dance. He also turned his beautiful dance partner into his future wife, who obtained a Master of Laws degree from Yale University. After graduation, he entered a law firm focusing on constitutional law and civil law, and moved to a government department before the age of 30. When he was less than 40 years old, he became the personal secretary of the governor of New York, a famous state in the United States. His future is bright. If he continues at this pace, he should be around 45 years old, and follow his current leader, become the other party's chief of staff, and help him get a sufficiently important position in the White House, and the other party will reciprocate. Give yourself a respectable enough position, and then the classic routine follows, running for House of Representatives, then senator, and finally governor of a state. And after sufficient opportunity, become the president of the federation. He was extremely confident in his life plan, so when even the slightest incident occurred in the plan he was familiar with, it would be very difficult for him to accept it, and everything that happened today could not be called a minor episode at all. It can be regarded as a thorough change. Mr. Hohenzollern has stirred up all kinds of storms in the United States in the past 2 months. It gave him the illusion that the other party did not need to accumulate experience, nor did he need to please those annoying media reporters. With the help of the internet and all that weird technology, he gained a huge voice that no one had ever had before. It can even directly influence the US election. These signs all indicate that times have changed. His future plans might not work, which is why he was so impatient today. Mr. Mario Cuomo also understood some of his secretary's inner thoughts. He looked around inconspicuously and made sure that there were only 2 people around. There were no hidden reporters on the steps of the Capitol, and the Secret Service bodyguards were far enough away. He looked at his personal secretary and lowered his voice. Whatever you want to say, you can ask it. We have worked together for so many years, since I was just a little congressman. You have been my secretary. I can answer any questions you want to ask, but please remember, Kit, any answer comes with a price. After I answer your question, there are some things you can no longer ask for, and if you really want to ask, remember to lower your voice. I don't want to fire my personal secretary in front of a global audience. This was already a political showdown, and Joe Ward was shocked by the words, and looked at his leader with some horror. As a politician who was able to become the governor of New York State, the other party must have accumulated political wisdom that he could not understand during his decades of political career. Gaining this wisdom will undoubtedly be of immense help to one's future political life. But at the same time, once you agree to the deal, there is a high possibility that you will use more than 10 years of hard work to get a few words that you can't even understand. The tremendous pressure made him at a loss as to what to do for a moment, until Mr. Mario Cuomo beside him reminded him again, time is running out. Please don't hinder my performance on stage. Chapter 319 True Political Teaching. Performance. How can you use this word Joe Ward, who was still struggling, became angry when he heard this, but he still demonstrated the qualities of an elite, and while speaking indignantly, he tried his best to lower the volume of his voice. He looked at his leader with a hint of confusion and anger in his eyes, and when he saw that the other party didn't say anything, he continued to add, "We are standing on the steps of the Capitol building, with the State House behind us, the symbol of the legitimacy of the state government. It is a testament to the authority of the American legal system and the federal constitution that you are the governor of New York, and what you are supposed to be delivering here is a political speech instead of like a." Joe Ward was embarrassed. The word in his throat could not be uttered. "Instead of performing on stage like a clown, right, Mr. Mario Cuomo suddenly spoke with a strange smile on his face. "I'll help you speak if you can't, but luckily, you're not stupid enough to make a loud noise in a place like this. You think this is a solemn occasion, a symbol of American law, but I tell you clearly, in the minds of the people in the square below the stairs, this place means nothing, except when the price of eggs goes up, or the price of oil goes up. This is where it becomes important, because they need a place to gather and someone to vent their anger at." Mr. Joe Ward, what on earth do you want to know? When Joe Ward heard his leader suddenly say his full name, he knew very well that there was no time for him to think about anything else. Instead of waiting for death, it would be better to ask the questions in his mind clearly, so he asked directly, "I really don't understand why you agreed to let Mr. Hohenzollern hold a so-called press conference here. This is a state government workplace. How can it be lent to a commercial company? This is a violation of federal regulations and an abuse of government property." Mr. Mario Cuomo glanced at the other person and the smile on his face grew even wider. "You asked this question, which proves that you can still be saved. Yes, at the critical moment, those abstruse political theories are all bullshit. It may be more beneficial for you to clarify some of the doubts in your heart. First, I will answer your last accusation. This is not an abuse of government property. I did not lend the square to a business company, but rented it to the other party." "What?" Joe Ward was visibly stunned. Mr. Mario Cuomo continued to speak indifferently. "Don't doubt your ears. According to state laws and federal regulations, government property can be rented or transferred. It just needs to be priced right. They rented it for 3 days and $300 million a day, so I think that's a good price. Don't limit your thinking to your life and the knowledge you read in books. This is America. Everything can be discussed." Joe Ward was completely speechless. As a traditional white elite, he had a strange and vague fantasy about his own country. The authority of the federal government and the pride and honor of one's own country all come from the heart. He never thought that one day he would hear such words from a governor. Not giving up, he continued to ask, "Even if this is legal, what about Mr. Hohenzollern personally? Let's not talk about the things in the past that have no evidence, but the financial crisis caused by this gentleman is a real fact. In New York State alone, according to the information I have, tens of billions of dollars of capital have been taken away from the capital market in various ways. Tens of billions of dollars are missing, and this is a huge blow to the prestige of the federal and state governments. Even if they cannot arrest him, they should have refused to cooperate. Why would Mr. Clinton, the future president, cooperate with such a person of corrupt character?" "Watch your words," Mr. Mario Cuomo scolded, although his voice was low, but his tone was very serious. "Don't involve Mr. President. This has nothing to do with the president right now. Mr. Hohenzollern doesn't have any moral issues at all. All of his business actions were legal, and from a government perspective, President Clinton can't thank him enough. How could I be angry with him? I'm the same. To some extent, the compensation he gave me is more than enough." "Why? What compensation?" Joe Ward was ready to get to the bottom of it today, and he couldn't wait to ask as soon as his leader finished speaking. Mr. Mario Cuomo looked at the other person without emotion, sighed and said, "It seems that you are really not suited to be a politician. You are a perfect secretary, Joe, but you are like a primary school student when it comes to politics." "I know what you mean. Causing a small financial storm across the country, so close to your own presidential inauguration. This is not a good thing for any future president. But you forget one thing, that was before the inauguration, when Mr. Clinton was not yet the president of the United States, and such a serious financial accident occurred at the end of the previous administration. So, for the new government, as long as this incident can be successfully resolved, it will not only not be a problem, but a gift package delivered right to their doorstep. The smile on Mr. Mario Cuomo's face completely disappeared, and his tone became cold and serious. Do you know that after Mr. Hohenzollern announced that he would hold a press conference here, his company's stock price has increased by more than 20% every day? It suggests that if this launch is a success, the crisis will be resolved automatically, and he can make an announcement about the production line in the United States. The progress of the assembly has been slightly delayed. We will wait until the new government takes office and obtains federal subsidy funds before we can proceed with the next finishing work. If I'm not mistaken, the first federal document signed by our future president will probably be given to Mr. Hohenzollern with a pen. As for my compensation, haven't you seen it all? This press conference is my compensation. All 48 media outlets from around the world, all the well-known media outlets in the United States were present, even when important heads of state were visiting Washington. I may not be able to gain such public support. Facing so many cameras, shouldn't I perform well? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 320, Struggle and Business. What a shocking answer. Joe Ward smiled bitterly and said unwillingly as he looked at his leader, who was starting to tidy up his clothes. What about justice and law? According to the theory you just said, everyone got what they wanted in the whole incident, but according to the government report I read, 1,800 middle-class families went bankrupt during this crisis. Nearly 10 people lost all their savings. Do they deserve this? Mr. Mario Cuomo stopped what he was doing, frowned and looked at the other person. He shook his head and said in a bad tone, "You are a master of law, yet you would say something like that. Let me ask you a very simple question. When a case happens, it is completely legal from a legal perspective, but full of flaws from a moral perspective. You should do what you want to do, and how you should pass the judgment." Joe Ward was speechless. Mr. Mario Cuomo gave a direct answer for him. "You know the answer. It doesn't matter if you don't tell me. I can tell you clearly what Mr. Hohenzollern did. Compared to the evil you have never seen, he is much kinder. At least he has some bottom line. He will not reap the benefits of innocent shareholders and then cheat the federal government out of insurance money. Forget everything you just said, otherwise you will never achieve your ideal in your life." After teaching Joe Ward a lesson, the portly governor did not communicate with him, but instead adjusted the details of his clothes under the escort of the Special Forces bodyguards. They arrived at the center of the stage that had been set up in the square and waited. As the sun gradually rose higher, light began to fill the entire square. The golden light and the bronze buildings set off each other beautifully, making the whole scene look solemn yet warm. At this moment, the New York Capitol seems to be covered by a mysterious veil, waiting to reveal the upcoming surprise. But just as everyone was looking forward to it, a roar of motor turning suddenly came from the outside of the square. A silver grey sports car that looked like a Porsche 911, like a flash of silver lightning, drifted handsomely and stopped directly in the center of the square. The reporters waiting in the center of the square were startled by the sudden appearance of the vehicle and fled in all directions. "It seems that I'm still not very popular," until a playful voice sounded, and a handsome blonde boy opened the car door and appeared in front of everyone. The moment he appeared, the reporters who had just dispersed rushed over again like a tide. Countless cameras and microphones were instantly pointed at Karl. "Mr. Hohenzollern, can you tell me in detail what happened during the 2 months you disappeared?" "Mr. Hohenzollern, someone has accused you of cashing out nearly $200 billion at the high end of the market during this crisis. Do you have anything to explain?" Mr. Hohenzollern, do you have anything to say about that amazing phone and the allegations against MIT? Countless questions kept coming at Karl like a string of cannonballs. Karl just smiled in response, slowly walked to the front of the vehicle, patted the hood of the vehicle and said, "I thought a professional media leader like you would be better at grasping the key points of the issue, but unfortunately, you obviously don't realize that the car I just drove is a real protagonist of this press conference." "What do you mean, isn't this a Porsche? What's so special about this car?" Everyone was confused by Karl's words, but he ignored the crowd's pursuit and blockade, and was surrounded by reporters with a smile on his face. He arrived at the stage that had been prepared long ago, but he was not in a hurry to go up, allowing the Secret Service bodyguards to form a human wall. Isolate those crazy reporters less than 2 steps away from you. Then he looked up at the gentleman with a round belly on the stage and shouted cheerfully, "Mr. Governor Mario Cuomo, I think this might be a better place to take a picture." Hearing this, Mario Cuomo, who was standing on the stage waiting, smiled kindly, shook his head slightly, and immediately walked off the stage quickly. As soon as the two met, the chubby governor opened his arms and embraced Carol in his arms. After a passionate hug, they shook hands tightly. White flashes kept flashing. There was no doubt that this scene would be captured in countless photos from different angles and published on the front pages of major newspapers tomorrow. As for the accompanying articles, that would depend on Karl's performance today. Mario Cuomo, with his signature professional smile, looks like a kind old man. He guided the young man beside him, shaking hands with him while slowly turning his body. This makes it convenient for all reporters present to take good photos from different angles, but unlike the smile on his face, the governor's heart was not so calm. He had intended to wait for the other person on the stage, just as he greeted all guests as governor. That was all routine. Regardless of the success or failure of the press conference, he would make a profit. But he didn't expect that this young man was indeed unusual. When he walked off the stage, he shook hands and hugged the other person in person on the stage. "I have just boarded the other party's pirate ship, and if this press conference fails, I may face very serious consequences. But on the other hand, if this press conference is successful, he will also be able to gain the other party's goodwill and enough political capital." Karl, who was cooperating in taking photos, was also somewhat shocked. He did not expect that the person next to him would be so decisive. It takes less than a few seconds of thinking to make a decision on such an important matter. It seems that the person who can become the governor of New York State is definitely not an ordinary person. After these two people with their own thoughts finished taking pictures, Mario Cuomo spoke first. He put on a very exaggerated expression and spoke in a blaming tone. "Mr. Hohenzollern, you really kept us waiting for too long. In the few days you were away, the New York State stock market lost tens of billions of dollars." Hearing this, Karl showed a playful smile, shrugged his shoulders and said indifferently, "No sir, that's why I came here today. I will never shirk my responsibility. I want to compensate my shareholders and investors, so I drove this car here. It doesn't matter if I lose tens of billions of dollars, because we can definitely make hundreds of billions again. This is not a big problem for us. Our company has advanced enough technology, and even more gratifying is that we have a great enough country, but there are great government workers like you." Chapter 321 Direct Spray. Ha 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 ha. "Mr. Hohenzollern, you are flattering me too much by saying that, Mario." Cuomo burst into laughter in response to Karl's flattery. After the two of them praised each other's business, they immediately walked onto the stage. As soon as they stood on the stage, they followed the rules. At this time, the governor of New York State, the organizer of this event, should give a short speech. However, he did not expect that as soon as Mario Cuomo stood in front of the microphone and had no time to speak, the reporters in the audience began to ask questions impatiently. "Mr. Hohenzollern, what exactly is the content of today's press conference? During the 2 months since you disappeared, there has been a lot of discussion in various media and newspapers, as well as on the internet, especially regarding that magical mobile phone. Does your company have the ability to produce it?" Similar Questions kept coming up, and the reporters kept repeating them loudly like a tape recorder that didn't need batteries. Mario Cuomo, who was standing in front of the microphone preparing to give a speech, couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. But as a politician who is well versed in politics, he reacted quickly, put on an exaggerated expression and said jokingly, "Mr. Hohenzollern, it seems that some people are not destined to be the protagonist. This stage is destined to be yours. You should answer these difficult questions. I'm at a loss as to how to deal with them." Facing the other party's teasing, Karl gave a polite but awkward smile and quickly walked to the microphone. He spread his hands and spoke to the people in the audience. "It seems that you are indeed very anxious. Well, then we won't waste any more time. I came here today mainly for two things. One is to shut up some guys. I know that the company I founded has touched the cakes of countless people, but what I want to say is that there is no conspiracy behind the scenes. It's just the snowstorm in winter. When spring comes, the sunshine will melt all the snow. Now, I can tell you clearly that my company has the ability to mass produce that phone. Although it is not mass produced, there is absolutely no problem producing about 1,000 phones a day." As soon as these words were spoken, the place became noisy, and the crowd watching the excitement burst into waves of applause and cheers. Mario Cuomo and a group of government officials standing behind Karl also showed a momentary look of excitement on their faces, but soon someone raised a question. A Fox TV News reporter spoke loudly into the high-end microphone. "How are you supposed to prove it? The global media has been searching hard for it around the world for 2 weeks, but I have never found a production line belonging to your company. The complexity of the mobile phone you designed requires a complete industrial structure configuration. Without any clues to prove it, how can we believe what you say? That's how we should believe. Is this a scam or not? That thing is impossible to build." Following the lead of this reporter, many other reporters have followed suit and increased their voices, with some even beginning to speak inflammatory words facing the surging public opinion in the audience. Karl seemed very calm. He shook his head and looked at the people in the audience with a smile. Then he suddenly pressed a button on the front desk, and after a sharp electric noise, the volume of the microphone in front of him was turned up to maximum. He just opened his lips slightly, and dozens of players surrounding the venue played a loud word at the highest volume. "Idiot." One word was like pressing the mute button, and the group of reporters that had been noisy just now suddenly became silent. Countless pairs of eyes, some angry, some horrified, some strangely, looked at the blonde boy on the stage. Even the government officials behind him opened their mouths wide in shock. Feeling countless pairs of eyes, Karl still had a smile on his face, his eyes fixed on the reporter who had just asked the question. His lips moved slightly. "Didn't you hear me? I said you're an idiot." This time the volume was even louder, and the last word "idiot" was almost shouted. Amplified by dozens of large players, the huge sound waves made the scalps of the people present feel numb. The reporter's face became even uglier than before. His eyes turned red, and he spoke loudly into the advanced microphone. "You are insulting my personality, and it is a personal attack. If you don't have a reasonable explanation, I will immediately file a lawsuit with the Procuratorate and hold you accountable for your legal responsibilities. Is that so?" Karl was unmoved, with a mocking smile on his face. "Then go quickly. I'm waiting for your lawyer to send me a letter. I call you an idiot because the questions you ask are incredibly stupid, even for those guys in the MIT lab. They are also a bunch of idiots. They call themselves scientists, so they should study their science properly. Don't get involved in the production line, the specific technology implementation of product development, and the real business level. What do they know? Maybe they know how the universe was formed. Maybe they know the secret of black holes, but do they know how to program the software needed for finishing? Do they know how long it takes to set up a production line? They know where the various parts of my phone are produced and what processes are used. They know when they are busy doing experiments in places they can't see. There are people who are also achieving great results. This series of non-stop questions once again silenced everyone present. Everyone looked at each other, and Karl continued to speak angrily. network technology laboratory can actually claim that it is impossible to produce that mobile phone with existing technology. They may not even have been to a real workshop. What they usually come into contact with are large servers and a large number of electrical pipes, but they have rarely seen a real production workshop. So how can they know everything that happens in this world? Don't be so arrogant. There are powers in many invisible places that you cannot imagine, but you still didn't answer the question. You criticized us so emotionally, but didn't give us any real results. We are not here to listen to your lectures. We want results. After being scolded by Karl, the reporter was obviously a little broken. His face turned red, but his words were still relentless. Karl seemed to have expected this. He suddenly stopped paying attention to the clown and took 2 steps back with his arms open. Shouted loudly with emotion, "The result is correct. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the future of mankind. Please be prepared. We are about to experience a magical journey, and we will enter the 21st century ahead of schedule." Chapter 322 National Guard enters. As soon as Karl finished speaking, anxious sirens suddenly sounded outside the square, and police cars painted with the FBI logo suddenly drove into the square. After the car stopped, a group of SWAT police officers, armed with live ammunition and wearing full sets of special operations uniforms, got out of the car. Holding explosion-proof shields, they forcibly drove away the reporters who were watching under the stage. They were driven into the designated audience area. The cordon was tightened, and then 3 red flares were fired into the sky. Countless reporters were confused by this operation and looked at each other in bewilderment. Even the governor of New York State, Mr. Mario Cuomo, who was on the stage, looked at Cole with surprise. "Mr. Hohenzollern, what's going on? Using judicial power to expel journalists is against New York state law. You can't do this on the grounds of the New York State Capitol. It's a huge loss of reputation for the New York State government." Mario Cuomo's voice was very loud and his tone was very angry. Even though he was several meters away from the microphone on the stage. The sound was still broadcast to the entire square through the microphone. Karl turned his head with a smile, looked at the chubby governor, and said in a comforting tone, "As an American citizen, I'm certainly aware of the local laws, and it is impossible for me to do so in such a solemn and sacred place. To intentionally violate New York state law, and what I did was not illegal at all. According to the Federal National Security Protection Act, any place within the United States of America that is designated as a military restricted area can restrict necessary media exposure." As he spoke, Karl handed the other party a piece of paper with the American national emblem on it and pointed to the signature on it. Quote 12:0012:0024. This building we belong to, as well as the area surrounding the square in front, have become military jurisdiction areas recognized by the federal president, so please cooperate with us. This is the mobilization application for the state National Guard. Please sign below. Mr. Mario Cuomo was stunned on the spot. He looked at the paper handed to him by Karl, and then looked at the young man in front of him who was still smiling. Said in a very small voice, "Mr. Hohenzollern, I think I should be able to know such an important matter in advance. Is it in your heart? Can't I even keep this a secret?" "Of course not." Karl waved his hands repeatedly and said in a low voice with a very aggrieved look, "A copy of this document should have been delivered to your secretariat 48 hours ago. To be on the safe side, I even sent Mr. Daniel Harvey to visit your private secretary, Joe Wood." Mr. Mario Cuomo suddenly lost his composure and shouted the name of his personal secretary. His expression changed drastically. From disappointment at the beginning to uncontrollable anger. He took out the pen he always carried with him from his coat pocket and signed his name on the National Guard's mobilization request. Then he looked back at the steps of the Parliament building with a sharp look, but found that he did not see the familiar figure. He quickly retracted his gaze and looked at Karl apologetically. "It seems that I'm not qualified to play the supporting role. I may delay your performance." "What are you talking about?" Karl seemed very indifferent. He took the paper casually in his hand, took out his mobile phone and dialed the number inside. "We have obtained the permit. The process was a bit tortuous, but everything went smoothly, and all plans are proceeding as planned. After saying that, Carol hung up the phone directly, and at the moment the phone was hung up, everyone suddenly felt a gust of wind swelling above their heads, a huge noise, accompanied by several dark shadows that blocked out the sun and sky, suddenly appeared in the square point. The reporter had just been forcibly driven into the audience area by the police, and was verbally threatening the police and even making direct eye contact with them. They all stopped what they were doing, hurriedly called out to their colleagues, who were still arguing with the police, and put their cameras on their shoulders, and pointed them at the sky point. I saw several Sea Stallion heavy transport helicopters belonging to the US Navy hovering above the square. At some point, a squadron of Marines descended to the ground via ropes, and began to command on the spot. Several large colorful containers were unloaded from the belly of the helicopter. Everyone was shocked by the scene. Even those bloggers who usually boasted about Area 51 and talked about conspiracy theories on the internet. At this moment, the audience was also stunned by surprise. It seemed that they did not come to the party in reality. Instead, you should watch a super realistic blockbuster in some magical cinema. After the Marines unloaded the cargo on the ground, they stood around the container with weapons in hand and began to stand guard. No one is allowed to take excessive photos of the containers, but unfortunately this is America, and there are always some fearless reporters. So from the time the container landed to the time the first gunshot was heard, only 5 seconds passed. But even so, no one left the venue after the gunshot, and everyone sat there with great interest. The TV station's technical reporter would have started the live broadcast directly if the streets outside the square had not been blocked. In less than half a minute, this place will be crowded with live satellite trucks from major TV stations around the world. And the ordinary people in the audience used all available means of communication to broadcast everything he was seeing live on the radio channel. On the stage, Mr. Mario Cuomo stood there in a daze, looking at the square below, which was completely unfamiliar to him. There were some indescribable feelings, but overall he felt happy. After all, the young man before us has once again, single-handedly, focused the world's attention on the land of the United States. And this time it was in New York, on his home turf. On the other side, after several waves of helicopters left, the square was filled with containers of different sizes and colors. Just when everyone was puzzled, there came another burst of roaring sounds of large displacement car engines from outside the square. Everyone immediately turned their eyes to the outside of the square, and some brave reporters even climbed up the smooth metal flagpole. Carrying a heavy camera is so that you can stand at a high point and capture exclusive shots in the distance. I saw a column of military vehicles with the New York State flag flying, driving towards this side in an orderly formation. Countless fully armed National Guard members jumped off the troop carrier, and the leading colonel came directly to the stage. He gave Mr. Mario Cuomo a standard military salute, then stood at attention and reported loudly, reporting to the commander, the New York National Guard Winged Cavalry Division has come to perform defense missions as ordered. Please produce the necessary documents. Chapter 323 On-site assembly line. Looking at the colonel saluting him, Mr. Mario Cuomo felt that this was more refreshing than eating 10 donuts in a row. You have to know that as the governor of New York State, he has reviewed his state's National Guard only a few times. This is almost a routine, except for huge southern states like Texas. There are almost no governors of small northern states willing to pay too much attention to its own National Guard because those troops are not only small in number, but also of shockingly low quality. The more crucial point is that there was no media exposure at all, unlike those southern states that were clamoring for a civil war every day. The northern states, like those in the Rust Belt, simply do not have the financial resources to support the National Guard. Either the people in the state have no interest in the National Guard at all, or the lack of topicality makes it impossible to attract public attention. To the extent that no previous New York governor had ever done this in front of the Capitol Square. Under the cameras of journalists around the world, orders were issued to an entire full-strength regiment of the National Guard. Countless camera lights flashed non-stop, making Mr. Mario Cuomo standing on the stage feel like the president of the Federation. Reviewing the US military honor guard. No man can resist this feeling. But even though he was extremely happy, he still maintained the composure of a senior politician, smiled and saluted the colonel. He responded with a serious expression. U.S. Army 1st Infantry Division, 3rd Special Ranger Battalion, Sergeant 3rd Class Marley reports to you. Colonel, I don't think I'm qualified to give you orders. The documents you need are in that gentleman's hands. Mr. Mario Cuomo's answer was very clever. He immediately revealed the unit number in which he had served. To prove that he had served in the US military, he demonstrated his loyalty to the country in front of the global media. At the same time, he cleverly took advantage of the fact that he was just a 3rd class non-commissioned officer and had no chance of issuing orders to a colonel. Avoiding the embarrassing situation that would make Washington. He kicked the ball directly to Carol. Carl also understood what he meant and walked over quickly and handed over the order signed by the federal president and the governor. The colonel took the order, glanced at it, then tapped his heels and saluted the two men again. Then he picked up the walkie-talkie he was carrying and gave a loud and powerful command. The documents have been confirmed. Everyone has implemented the Halo plan. Heavy machinery has entered the scene. After the order was issued, those who went out of the venue only felt the ground shaking, and then a number of strange shaped heavy machinery drove directly into the square. Some of these machines began to assist the Marines in moving containers of different colors. Some are even stranger. They place solid steel pipes around and then build them into square structures. The construction speed is very fast, just like an expert is building Lego toys in less than half an hour. A rectangular steel structure covering almost 2/3 of the square was built. It stood like this on the square, and then with the help of heavy machinery, pieces of insulation boards and anti-peeping glass were installed. Numerous panels began to be firmly fixed in the gaps of the frames, and the roar of the machinery made the cheap stage tremble. Everyone present was stunned, looking at the bizarre scene before them, regardless of whether they were ordinary audience members who were lucky enough to be invited. Even those well-informed reporters seemed to have no idea what was happening before their eyes until an old man who looked drunk pointed at the construction site in front of him and said with a trifling tone, "What are you doing? Isn't it said to be high-tech? Why does it look like the same job I did when I built a factory in South Carolina? Why, even a place as rich as New York State has sold its state capitol building and started operating factories instead. It's better this way, so that you vampires don't have to do things we don't understand and ruin our pensions and our jobs." At first, everyone thought it was just the crazy talk of a drunkard, but as the building was wrapped up, there were more and more mechanical sounds, and the reporters could no longer bear it. Some of them even tied loudspeakers to their waists, risking being shot. He climbed up the metal flagpole standing nearby and waited until he was at the right height to be able to see the stage. Shouted desperately into the microphone, "Mr. Hohenzollern, please tell me whether this is a small factory or not, and what exactly do you want to do by doing this? Do we need to order the sniper to shoot it down?" The captain of the Secret Service nearby asked Mr. Mario Cuomo. Mr. Mario Cuomo smiled and waved his hand. "Don't be nervous, young man. We are no longer the protagonists of this drama. We can't steal the limelight from the protagonists. Just watch that person's performance with peace of mind. Aren't you curious about what the other person is doing?" As he spoke, he looked at Karl, who was standing in front of him. As expected, he was this incredibly handsome young man. He walked slowly to the microphone in the center of the stage, considerately turned down the volume, and then spoke without reservation. "Congratulations, sir. You guessed it right. I'm proud of your bravery. Please wait until you get down. With the help of the staff, register your name and you will receive a special gift. As for what it is, there's no need to keep you in suspense. It's the phone that Mr. Harvey gave away earlier." As he spoke, Karl signaled to the reporters who were lying on the flagpole like monkeys to come down. After they landed safely, he slowly turned up the volume, then opened his arms again and spoke with great enthusiasm. "Compared to those bats in the laboratory that have never seen the sun, what I'm showing you today is President Clinton. We will present to audiences across the US the economic priorities and global integration that we have emphasized in previous speeches. What is true globalization? What is true industrial technology? We are not living in the same way as we were 50 years ago. 78 hours is enough to dispatch complex production parts from all over the world to any place on the earth. As he said this, he looked at his watch again and pointed to the time on it. 1 hour, 29 minutes and 31 seconds. With sufficient support from zero lines, we can create a complete industrial line. Ladies and gentlemen, let us fight back against those conspiracy lies with the most direct and effective means. I will produce 1000 specially numbered founder phones here, in cooperation with my company's employees. To those righteous people who still insisted on not selling their stocks during this man-made stock market crash, let's stay tuned. Chapter 324 Intermission. There was no more sound, and the scene was as quiet as death, except for the temporary steel structure factory building in the center of the square point. The continuous sounds of cutting and welding shocked the audience as well as the reporters who had been maintaining their strength point. Everyone fell silent spontaneously, staring at the strange building in front of them. After waiting carefully for 10 minutes, the colonel walked back to the stage with a document, stood at attention, and saluted Mr. Mario Cuomo and Karl. Then he opened the folder and handed 2 sheets of A4 paper to the 2 people. Sir, this is a document regarding the approval of temporary industrial production from the New York State government. Your signature is required. The other one is for you, Mr. Hohenzollern. This is the approval document from your company's finance department. You need to sign it. The site will be handed over to your company's personnel for command. After all, the labor and material costs used in production are your company's property. You really have considered everything, without any details or legal issues. Mr. Mario Cuomo reached out to take the A4 paper, put on his glasses again, and reviewed it carefully, then looked at Karl and teased. Of course. Karl responded with a smile, took his A4 paper, and signed his name at the end without even looking at it. Then he handed the document back to the colonel and said with a smile, "We are a legal and compliant company, and the United States is also a country ruled by law. Of course, everything must comply with procedures. This is the spirit of the law. Everything must be done according to procedures. Even live performances must pay attention to details to be excellent." When saying this, Karl did not look at Mr. Mario Cuomo. But Mr. Mario Cuomo kept staring at the back of the young man in front of him. He did not expect that the other party was so thoughtful. He even attached several insurance documents from American International Group, AIG, to the approval report. It includes common industrial insurance, as well as personal accident insurance for all personnel on site. In other words, the other party had even considered that someone would deliberately sabotage the event, and had even made arrangements for the afterlife of everyone present. He was even thoughtful enough to buy himself an independent insurance policy with a coverage of up to $10 in case any accident happened, and he unfortunately died today. I could even get tens of millions of dollars in compensation, and after taking a closer look, I might even be tempted. But he didn't show any of this in his expression. After carefully reviewing all the documents, he used his own pen to sign his name on the approval document, and added the prefix of the governor of New York State, and the specific date of signing. It is indeed as the boy said. Even a performance must pay attention to details to be excellent. After doing all this, the colonel took the 2 documents and carefully examined the 2 signatures. He then turned and left the stage, and began giving orders to his soldiers, the National Guard who had been blocking the streets outside the square. An armored vehicle immediately cleared a path, and several small trucks painted with the word MAT quickly drove into the square from the path cleared by the armored vehicle. The quiet crowd became noisy again, and the reporters who had been waiting for a long time aimed their cameras at the van. Soon the door of the truck opened, and boxes of spare parts marked top secret began to be moved into the makeshift factory building by forklifts. The move took less than 10 minutes in total, and when the rear hatch of the last truck opened, the crowd watching was completely stunned. It was a group of people wrapped tightly in white dust-proof suits. They lined up in an orderly manner, walked into the factory, and then locked the door from the inside. The lights in the factory came on again. This time there was no sound of welding or metal cutting, only the unreasonably quiet sound of motors turning. "Okay, everyone, the show ends here. It takes time to produce mobile phones, and it's been so long now. If you feel hungry, you can go have lunch first. In about 2 hours, we will officially start this press conference. What other press conferences are there? Isn't this exciting enough? When they first heard this, everyone present thought that Cole was just going through the motions, exchanging pleasantries with them in order to get closer to them and help build his personal image. No one would be stupid enough to leave the venue at this time, knowing that the current location of a square would be a good place to trade. There are plenty of people out there willing to pay piles of cash for it. Everyone here, that's right, everyone. As long as you attend this press conference, you can make unimaginable wealth through interviews or personal blogs. It can be said that each of them now has a mountain of gold sitting under their buttocks as a result. The incredibly handsome blonde boy on the stage suddenly told them that there was no mountain of gold under their buttocks, it was a mountain of diamonds. How could they not be excited? As long as their physical limits have not been reached, I guess no one would be willing to leave now. This is exactly the effect that Karl wants on the stage, because his business principle has always been to get something for nothing. The performance was expensive, and Kevin Lestrange would have to pay the bill. Then I will definitely become that stingy little Taurus, nagging all the time, until I start to lose my hair. So he had to find a scapegoat to pay for his performance, and the advertising banners standing around the square were part of it. The real big money still needs to be achieved through other sponsorships. So he turned and walked towards Mr. Mario Cuomo, looked at him with a smile and said, "Mr. Governor, it's getting late now. It will take at least 10 hours to produce the phone, and I'm really a little hungry now, but if it's just the two of us, we can get proper food arrangements." With so many cameras, it would be a bit too much to justify. What about the legal issues? Mr. Mario Cuomo responded with a smile, but his answer seemed irrelevant. Carol quickly understood what he meant and took out a crumpled A4 paper from his trouser pocket and handed it over. "I thought about the details of this before I came here. In accordance with New York state law and federal regulations, during the period when government property is leased, the lessee may conduct certain commercial activities here, as long as the lessee agrees. The results of the bidding will be out soon. We just need your signature and the approval of the state government's financial officials." Chapter 325 Profit Distribution Plan. While listening to Karl's explanation, Mr. Mario Cuomo did not even try to open the crumpled A4 paper. He was very clear that now it was time to talk about the distribution of his interests, a rule he had already understood when he was a New York state congressman. In any large conference, the public meeting time is actually a kind of performance moment. Facing countless cameras and lenses, all congressmen have to appear tough or perform a show that highlights their personal image. This will demonstrate their responsibility to the voters and cooperate with the party's requirements. But in fact, those important topics that seem to be related to the national economy and people's livelihood are usually discussed at the lunch table during recess, or when going to the restroom during a trip. The decision will be confirmed after a few brief exchanges with lobbyists and political brokers from the other party. Just as the young man had just said, the show was on hold, and it was now lunchtime. We should also talk about how to distribute the cake, but the situation is a bit special now. After all, they are still in a public place. Even if the camera is not pointed at them now, they cannot leave any evidence behind, and they have to pay attention to details to perform the play well. So he turned his head and looked behind him, and a thin, ordinary looking middle-aged man walked towards him. Mr. Mario Cuomo handed the paper to the other party and introduced him to Karl. "This is Ed Eugene, the Secretary of the Treasury of the New York State Government. Let me tell you about the detailed terms of finance and monetary interests. It's better for you to talk to him in detail. After all, I'm only a law major, and I'm not very good at financial issues. Professional matters should be left to professionals. Don't you agree, Mr. Hohenzollern?" Faced with the other party's non-stick pan behavior, Karl did not force the other party. He knew that sometimes he had to give the other party some dignity. So he turned to look at Mr. Ed Eugene, shook hands with him cordially, and got straight to the point. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Ed Eugene. in order not to waste the precious time of both parties. I'm a little hungry, so let's get straight to the point. This press conference will last at least 10 hours, even if we can endure hunger and not eat for now, but in the following period of time, not taking in any food and fresh water for a long time will inevitably cause a huge burden on the body, not to mention those climbing experts just now. I believe they are very hungry now. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, for the sake of my company's business interests, I have arranged for Mr. Lestrange, who is in charge of the finances of my company, to come here before coming here. There has been a food tender across the United States, and the results should be out soon. We should talk about the food supply in detail, and the specific distribution content. It's an honor, Mr. Hohenzollern. Mr. Ed Eugene seemed a little nervous. On the one hand, he really didn't expect it. I was surprised that I could have a face-to-face conversation with such a media celebrity. On the other hand, I was also impressed by the maturity and sophistication of this young man, and his words were almost impeccable. So he could only take the defensive and speak respectfully. Since this happened suddenly, can I first listen to your company's plan? I think you must have a very appropriate plan to provide. Karl smiled slightly. He certainly knew that in the negotiation, stating his offer first would undoubtedly put himself at a disadvantage, but he is not willing to waste any more time now. On the one hand, he really doesn't think the money is important. On the other hand, he was really hungry, and he wanted to appease his small wallet and his chief technical engineer, who was always in a bad mood. I have been staying in the kitchen every day these past few days, cooking various dishes for these two guys, and I seem to have forgotten about my own stomach. In order to prepare for today's performance, he cooked 3 meals a day for 2 people at once last night. He hadn't had a good rest the whole night, let alone a good meal. After this whole set of performances, his stomach was now rumbling. When he thought about how much he had contributed to this company, Karl felt that he was the best boss in the world. So he spoke directly. Whichever company wins a bid, they will provide free food for everyone present until the end of the event. This includes you and other government officials. You must eat all the food in front of the camera with the most cheerful expression possible. Secondly, the company's advertisement was allowed to be hung in the most prominent place in Parliament Square until the entire production line and stage were dismantled. There are no problems with the last few points, Mr. Ed Eugene said calmly, but how can it have any publicity effect if government officials eat the company's food in front of the camera? It may be a violation of public service rules, and more importantly, I can only represent myself, the governor, and other colleagues. I can't guarantee whether they are willing to use their image rights and influence to undertake this work, let alone calculate the benefits faced with the other party's request and potential asking price. Karl did not hesitate and spoke directly. 20% of the revenue, and in order to take into account the special status of each of you, when this revenue is achieved, the revenue of other TV stations and sponsorships will also be included. We will also allocate 20% to set up a third-party fund to support the hard-working civil servants of the state government. The specific allocation of daily food consumption expenditure, transportation subsidies and other consumption can be completely determined by the government. The principles for distributing benefits are left to the New York state government to decide. Hearing this, Mr. Ed Eugene couldn't help but reveal an expression of admiration for the blonde boy in front of him. The other party has considered it very thoroughly. Doing this does not have any legal burden, and can also avoid a lot of trouble. If the distribution is implemented in accordance with the state government's practices, the interests of everyone can be maximized, especially those at the top. After all, transportation subsidies and the like should be enough for a grassroots civil servant who rides a bicycle every day. $5 a week should be enough. The Cadillac driven by a senior minister is not used to boil water, and it costs at least $500 a week. After all, grassroots civil servants only need to do their jobs well, but senior officials like them need to think more about luxury cars. Everything is distributed according to demand, so no one has anything to say. Then Mr. Ed Eugene held out his right hand and said flatteringly, "I believe there is no better solution than this. Mr. Hohenzollern, I think there will be no problem facing the state treasurer's outstretched right hand." Karl did not shake it this time. Instead, he suddenly answered a phone call and shouted loudly, "McDonald's." "That's fine. To be honest, I prefer Burger King. I need pickles for 4 people. The cat and dog at home have been a bit grumpy lately, and I need to calm down." Chapter 326 Lunchtime and the Price of the Future. Listeners, you may never imagine that I'm now standing at the corner of the square in front of the New York State Capitol. In the steel building in front of me, there is a complete mobile phone production line, which is just like the Transformers in the cartoon. It was even more unbelievable that he suddenly appeared in front of everyone amidst a burst of mechanical noise. In this place full of political stench and constitutional conspiracy, you can actually enjoy the most authentic American freedom cuisine, McDonald's. Hamburgers represent the national spirit and the separation of powers. You heard me right. I'm eating a Big Mac right now. Follow my channel and you can enjoy exclusive discounts with the exclusive redemption code. Let us enjoy the free food together and enjoy this carnival that belongs to the free people of this country. In a corner of Parliament Square, a white man with strange looks and exaggerated muscles was reporting everything he saw on his broadcast blog via radio equipment. He is an internet celebrity in several communities, along with many prominent critics from mostly Republican states. His program is also filled with reports about lizard people, shadow government, and the real world hidden in the dark. Thanks to his eloquence, these reports sound very good as stories, but in the eyes of reporters from those famous TV stations, these reports are a bit too exaggerated and funny, just like what the person in front of him is doing now. He continued to chatter while eating the burger in big mouthfuls. I now strongly suspect that this mysterious Mr. Hohenzollern is the person from that real world. The real world must be hidden in human society, like a small bubble hidden in a big bubble. It's right next to you and me. It could be someone you or I know. According to my gossip, the life records of Mr. Hohenzollern before the age of 10 are completely gone, and no hospital can prove that he was born there. Isn't it strange that no school has ever proven that he received preschool education there? Even his parents are just mysteries in the files. Please continue to follow my channel. We will definitely reveal the secrets of this real world in the future. At the beginning, the reporters just wanted to watch the fun of the crazy things said by this big guy. But after hearing what happened next, some people inevitably became interested, and some even prepared to strike up a conversation with that guy. I wanted to get some words out of the other person, but at this moment, the sound of a helicopter suddenly came from overhead again. A helicopter that had obviously been hastily painted and had the words PepsiCo written on it slowly moved under the command of National Guard soldiers. After landing on an open space in the square, the staff from the helicopter began distributing ice coke to everyone present. The accompanying cameras also started filming, and many reporters saw this scene and joined the filming. After all, this is real news material. Not many people would care about the crazy talk of a redneck. On the stage, Mr. Mario Cuomo stuffed his 4th hamburger into his mouth and watched the Pepsi helicopters landing one after another. I couldn't help but praise him. Mr. Hohenzollern, you are indeed a true business genius. I never thought that a lunch session could be divided into a main course and a drink. It is really hard to imagine making 2 profits from one business. It's 3 cents. Karl threw the last piece of pickle into his mouth and turned to look at the other person with a smile. A month ago, all the passenger helicopters in New York were acquired by a subsidiary of our company. This includes a full set of aircraft painting services, which are also undertaken by our subsidiaries, and the helicopters they use to transport cargo. We need to be paid enough money. Hearing this, Mr. Mario Cuomo was completely stunned. He looked at the handsome young man in front of him with some disbelief. Asked, somewhat puzzled, "But apart from today, there will be very few opportunities for such a large order to appear again. Your company is blindly purchasing so many helicopters. Isn't it possible that you will suffer a huge loss later?" "Of course not." Karl took his coke from the state finance minister and said to him with a smile, "You can ask Mr. Ed Eugene. The purchase of major vehicles can be offset against taxes, as long as they are still used under the company, and, like you just said, the industry for available helicopters has been tough, so the price was low when we bought them. This business is enough to pay for itself, which is equivalent to purchasing high quality assets at zero cost, and it can also offset federal and state government taxes. That's equivalent to earning 3 profits at the same time, so I was wrong just now. We earned 6 profits from this lunch, so the income is still good. Mr. Hohenzollern, you have made a lot of money, but this is not good news for the state government, especially my department. Mr. Ed Eugene, whose name was suddenly mentioned by Karl, was obviously stunned for a moment, then immediately changed his expression and said with a bitter face, "I'm a very frank person." Karl pretended to be apologetic and turned to look at Mr. Ed Eugene behind him, helplessly Point and other New York state government officials, after thinking about it, took the packaging of the McDonald's meal they had just finished eating. Point he casually pulled out a napkin, smoothed it out, and started writing and drawing on it with the pen he carried with him. Point then he stood up and handed the napkin to Mr. Ed Eugene. "What does this mean, sir?" Mr. Ed Eugene asked puzzledly, looking at the napkin covered with words. "This is a contract." Karl responded with a smile. "A contract of intent to build a complete new energy vehicle factory in New York State. It includes battery production lines, vehicle assembly workshops, and a full set of other supporting equipment. The factory area cannot be estimated for now and needs to be calculated by professionals, but the number of new jobs that can be added is conservatively estimated to be around 4. Mr. Ed Eugene was stunned and turned to look at Mr. Mario Cuomo with a slight tremor in his body. Mr. Mario Cuomo also immediately realized the importance of this napkin, and threw the burger he had just taken a few bites of directly to the ground. He wiped the sauce off his lips with his tie, ran over quickly, took the napkin with his hand, and looked at it carefully. He looked up at Carol and asked tremblingly, "Mr. Hohenzollern, please forgive me for being rude, but I think this so-called new energy vehicle, is it in the distant future, or is it hidden in a corner that we haven't discovered yet?" Chapter 327 Tesla Sue 7. Hearing this, Carol smiled without saying anything, turned around and pointed his finger at the silver car that looked like a Porsche 911 in the left corner of the center of the square. After that, Karl finished drinking the Coke and threw it aside casually. Then he thought about it and felt that something seemed to be wrong. He walked up to Mr. Ed Eugene and handed him a $20 bill. "I remember that according to the relevant regulations of New York City management, there is a fine of $20 for randomly discarding garbage. It may be difficult to find a policeman to pay the fine now, so I'd better hand it to you directly. By the way, after the press conference is over, remember to give me an invoice for paying the fine." After that, under the gaze of everyone, Karl once again walked to the microphone in the center of the stage and tapped the microphone twice with his hands. The dull knocking sound spread throughout the square through the loudspeakers, reaching the reporters and other spectators who had just taken a break. He took 2 bites at a time and finished the hamburger and Coke in his hands. Then he threw the wrapping paper and the Coke cup randomly into various corners. Seeing this scene, Karl turned to look at Mr. Ed Eugene, who was still standing there in a daze with $20 in his hand. He said with a knowing smile, "Before the press conference begins, I would like to remind everyone that you are now in the Capitol Square in New York State. This is New York's window to the world, so please be sure to abide by the city's health management laws. Ladies and gentlemen who just dumped garbage carelessly, please pay the $20 fine at the relevant intersection after the press conference. By the way, please prepare cash. And a personal reminder, I have just paid the fine, so remember to get the receipt." After such a humorous speech, the whole audience burst into laughter. Everyone's mood relaxed a little, and surrounded by everyone's laughter, Karl suddenly spoke loudly in front of the microphone. "Hello, Tesla, turn on all the vehicle's lights, doors, and trunk." "What does it mean? Is there anyone here named Tesla who would come up with such a strange name?" Carol's sudden words made everyone present a little confused, and those who were laughing just now looked at each other in bewilderment. Until a slightly neutral male mechanical voice came from the left side of the center of the square. "Okay, Mr. Hohenzollern, all vehicle lights have been turned on, and all doors and trunks have been opened. As Soon as he finished speaking, a brilliant silver-white light instantly illuminated the entire venue, and at the same time, a dynamic music slowly came. Everyone's attention was attracted by the lights and music, and they noticed the silver grey vehicle that looked like a Porsche 911 and was parked on the left side of the center of the square. At some point, all the vehicle lights were turned on, and all the doors and trunk were opened. If the ground of the square could not rotate, the reporters holding cameras would have thought that they had traveled to Germany on a business trip and were attending the Frankfurt Auto Show. Just as everyone was puzzled and a little curious, they slowly gathered in the corner of the square and began to use various equipment to take pictures of the strange car in front of them. The familiar young voice was heard on the stage again. "Hello, Tesla, start the engine and determine the surrounding traffic conditions." "No problem. The engine has been started and the surrounding traffic conditions have begun to be assessed." A violent engine sound suddenly rang out, but people approaching the vehicle discovered that this was not the sound of this car's engine. It's more like a superb simulated sound wave emitted from multiple speakers inside the vehicle. Because at the moment of starting, this car did not show the slight shaking that other fuel vehicles should have. The whole car was unnaturally quiet, as if an electric toy was being started. Just when everyone was about to explore why the car was so quiet, the neutral male mechanical voice sounded again. The onboard radar detection showed that there were many people around, and they were moving towards the vehicle, so the conditions for relocation were not met. At the same time, according to the news received by radio, according to the temporary traffic management notice issued by the New York State Government Traffic Management Office, the vehicle is currently located in the center of the traffic control area. Please wait patiently for the traffic control to be lifted. Observe relevant traffic rules. If you encounter an emergency, the vehicle will be in emergency response mode and ready to alert you at any time. The vehicle has not yet been connected to the New York State Police internal network and is unable to provide the nearest patrol officer location information. Oh my god, is this still a car? He is smarter than my son who stays at home and relies on his parents for support. I really need a vehicle like this. Only when I drive this vehicle to interview gangs, I don't have to worry about my life safety. I feel like I have traveled through time from the future. No, even if you are the most amazing science fiction writer today, you can't imagine what I'm seeing now. Everyone was shocked by this performance. Even the professional journalists who claimed to be well informed. Or those broadcast bloggers who usually promote conspiracy theories and some vulgar jokes on the radio. Everyone looked at the car in front of them with longing expressions. Some reporters reacted faster and repeated the same trick, tying several speakers around their waists and climbing up the flagpole next to them. He asked Karl on the stage, speaking from across the air in a posture like a monkey hanging on a tree, "Mr. Hohenzollern, are you sure this is not some rehearsed performance? It's hard to believe that this is a product that can be produced in this century. It should be from the future. Can you tell us why this car is so quiet?" In response to reporters' questions, Karl showed his signature professional smirk, opened his arms and responded loudly, "It seems that a high-calorie diet can sometimes make the brain immersed in happiness, so that it forgets some of the information just provided. Remember the theme of the conference I mentioned a few hours ago. We are going to experience a magical journey that can be called a dream. We will arrive in the 21st century ahead of schedule." After saying this, Karl bowed slightly and gracefully to the people watching from the audience, just like a performer in a drama. Then he stretched out his right hand, pointed at the vehicle, and introduced it loudly. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us officially enter the theme of this press conference after a long wait. Matt's latest product, the Tesla SU7, is a pure electric car from the 21st century." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.